Do you consent to being detained? 5 words that stopped 3 armed security guards cold. 5 words that saved a woman's dignity. 5 words spoken by a single father who had no idea he was confronting corporate corruption worth billions. This is the story of Nathan Reed, a Marine veteran who asked one simple question and ignited a firestorm that would expose military fraud, save his daughter from kidnappers, and bring down an empire built on the graves of fallen soldiers. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of North Shore Mall hummed with their usual Saturday afternoon indifference, casting that peculiar shade of artificial daylight that made everything look slightly unreal, slightly sterile. Families drifted through the wide corridors like schools of fish, moving from store to store with the practiced aimlessness of weekend shoppers. Children's laughter echoed off the polished tile floors. The smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh pretzels wafted from the food court. It was ordinary, peaceful, safe. Nathan Reed had always appreciated ordinary. He walked slowly, his 7-year-old daughter Lily's small hand tucked securely in his. She skipped slightly with each step, her pink sneakers lighting up with each impact against the floor. Little bursts of color in an otherwise beige world. Her backpack, shaped like a cartoon bunny, bounced against her shoulders. She was humming something, a song from school probably, and every few steps she'd look up at him with those enormous brown eyes that were exact replicas of her mother's. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now. Cancer didn't care that she was only 32, didn't care that she had a 4-year-old daughter who still needed her, didn't care that she'd never done anything to deserve the sentence it handed down. Nathan had learned to live with the absence, to build a life in the space she'd left behind. But moments like these, when Lily looked up at him with that particular expression of complete trust, still caught him in the chest like shrapnel. "Daddy, can we look at the bookstore?" Lily asked, tugging on his hand. "Mrs. Peterson said there's a new book about a girl who talks to dolphins, and I really, really want it." Nathan smiled, the expression coming easier these days than it had in the first year after Sarah's death. "Sure, sweetheart, but just looking, okay? We need to be smart about money this month." "I know," Lily said with the solemn understanding of a child who'd learned young that money didn't grow on trees. "But looking is free, right?" "Looking is always free." They were passing the central atrium, where a large fountain sprayed water in choreographed patterns, and shoppers sat on the surrounding benches when Nathan first noticed the disturbance. It was subtle at first, a shift in the crowd's energy, a ripple of attention moving away from individual concerns toward a single point of focus. People were slowing down, turning, whispering. That particular kind of whispering that meant something was wrong. Nathan's instincts, honed by 6 years in the Marine Corps and another year working as a legal advisor in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, immediately sharpened. His eyes tracked the source of the disruption. Near the fountain, 3 men in dark blue security uniforms had surrounded a woman. She stood alone in their triangle, her posture unnaturally still, her hands visible and empty at her sides. She was dressed simply: dark jeans, a cream-colored blouse, a leather jacket that looked expensive but understated. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked to be in her mid-30s, composed, calm. But there was something in the way she held herself that suggested this calm was a choice, not a natural state. It was the stillness of someone choosing not to react. The security guards were a different story entirely. They stood too close to her, invading personal space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate. One of them, a thick-necked man with a military-style buzz cut, was speaking to her in a low voice that didn't carry to the gathering crowd, but whose tone was unmistakably aggressive. Another guard, younger and leaner, had his hand resting on the radio clipped to his belt, a gesture that was probably meant to look official, but instead looked threatening. The third man, the largest of the 3, simply stood with his arms crossed, blocking any potential exit. Nathan felt Lily's hand tighten in his. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice suddenly small and uncertain. "Are they bad guys?" The question hit Nathan like a punch, out of the mouths of babes. Children saw the world in simpler terms, and sometimes those simple terms cut right to the truth. "I don't know yet, honey," he said quietly, even as his mind began running calculations, assessments, the kind of rapid threat evaluation he'd once done in compounds in Helmand Province and dusty Iraqi villages. The woman in the center of the security triangle hadn't moved. She was saying something now, her voice too low to hear, but whatever it wasn't submissive. The thick-necked guard stepped even closer, his face inches from hers. The crowd was growing. At least 40 people now circled the scene, maintaining that invisible barrier that separated spectators from participants. Nathan saw phones coming out, screens lighting up. Of course, this was 2023. Nothing happened anymore without an audience, without documentation. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," the thick-necked guard said, his voice finally loud enough to carry. "We have reports of suspicious activity, and you match the description of a shoplifter we've been tracking." The woman's response was calm, almost eerily so. "I haven't shoplifted anything. I haven't even made a purchase today. I'd be happy to show you my ID and the contents of my bag, but I'm not going anywhere with you." "That's not your choice to make," the younger guard said, his hand now actually gripping his radio. "We have authority to detain suspicious persons on mall property." Nathan's jaw tightened. That wasn't how the law worked. That wasn't how any of this worked. The woman apparently knew that too. "You have authority to observe and report," she said, her voice still level but with an edge now, sharp as a blade. "You do not have authority to detain anyone without probable cause. I'm happy to wait here while you call actual law enforcement, but I'm not going to your office, and I'm not going to allow you to search my person or property without a warrant." "That's what every thief says," the thick-necked guard sneered. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." He reached for her arm. The woman stepped back, not panicked, but deliberate. "Do not touch me." The guard followed, his hand extending again. The largest guard moved to block her retreat. The younger one unclipped his radio. And Nathan Reed made a decision. "Lily," he said softly, releasing her hand and kneeling down to her eye level. "I need you to stay right here, okay? Right here on this bench. Don't move. Daddy needs to go talk to those men for just a minute." Lily's eyes went wide. "Are you going to help that lady?" "I'm going to make sure everyone follows the rules," Nathan said. "Can you be brave for me?" Lily nodded, though her lower lip trembled slightly. Nathan kissed her forehead, stood, and walked forward. The crowd parted for him as he moved through it, perhaps sensing something in his bearing. The squared shoulders, the steady gait, the quiet confidence of someone who'd walked into worse situations than this. Nathan wasn't a large man, not compared to the security guards. He stood 5'10", with a lean build that came from running and bodyweight exercises rather than gym memberships. But there was something in the way he moved that made people step aside. He walked directly into the confrontation space, positioning himself slightly between the woman and the thick-necked guard. "Excuse me," Nathan said, his voice calm but carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "I need to ask a question." The thick-necked guard turned, irritation flashing across his broad face. "This doesn't concern you, buddy. Keep moving." "Actually, it does concern me," Nathan replied evenly. "I'm a citizen witnessing what appears to be an illegal detention. That makes it my concern." The woman's eyes met his for the first time. They were gray, intelligent, calculating. She gave him the smallest nod. Acknowledgement, not gratitude. Not yet. "Illegal detention?" The younger guard laughed, a harsh sound. "We're mall security. This is our jurisdiction." "No," Nathan said simply. "It's not." He turned to face all three guards, making sure his body language remained non-threatening but firm. Years of training had taught him that presence mattered as much as words, that calm authority often succeeded where aggression failed. "My name is Nathan Reed. I'm a former Marine and a certified paralegal with experience in criminal law. What you're doing right now is called false imprisonment, which is both a civil tort and, depending on circumstances, a criminal offense." The thick-necked guard's face darkened. "We have reasonable suspicion." "Reasonable suspicion doesn't grant you detention powers," Nathan interrupted, his voice still calm but now with steel underneath. "You're not law enforcement officers. You're private security on private property. Your authority extends to observation and requesting actual police response. That's it." "Who the hell do you think you are?" The largest guard growled, stepping toward Nathan with clear menace. Nathan didn't move. "I'm someone who knows the law. I'm also someone with a phone." He pulled out his cell phone, holding it up. "As are about 50 other people here. So before you do anything else, before you put hands on this woman or on me, I need you to answer a very simple question." He looked at each guard in turn, making sure they understood the weight of what came next. "Do you consent to being detained?" The silence that followed was profound. The fountain continued its choreographed spray. A baby cried somewhere in the distance. But in that immediate circle of confrontation, time seemed to stop. The woman's eyes widened slightly. Surprise and something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. The thick-necked guard's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. "What?" "It's a simple question," Nathan continued, his tone almost conversational now. "Do you consent to being detained? Because if you don't, and I assume you don't, then you understand exactly what you're doing to this woman. You're attempting to restrict her freedom of movement without her consent and without legal authority to do so." "We have authority," the younger guard began. "No." Nathan's voice cut like a knife. "You have a uniform and a radio. That's not the same thing as authority. Authority in this context comes from law, and the law doesn't give you what you're claiming." He turned slightly toward the woman, including her in his address, while still keeping the guards in his peripheral vision. "Ma'am, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know your rights. You have no obligation to go with these men. You have no obligation to provide identification unless you're being lawfully detained by actual law enforcement. You have every right to walk away from this situation." "Sir, you need to back off," the thick-necked guard said, his voice rising. "This is mall property, and you're interfering with our duties." "Your duties don't include violating civil rights," Nathan replied. "And if you touch her, if you try to physically restrain her, you're committing assault and battery. If you're lucky, you'll just get sued. If you're not lucky, you'll catch charges." The woman spoke then, her voice carrying a new quality, not relief exactly, but something like vindication. "He's absolutely correct. And since you seem confused about the law, let me clarify my position. I have not shoplifted anything. I have not committed any crime. I have no obligation to submit to your interrogation or to accompany you anywhere. I'm going to leave now. If you attempt to stop me, I will press charges. Are we clear?" The thick-necked guard's hand moved toward her arm again, an automatic gesture of authority challenged. "I wouldn't," Nathan said quietly, but with such absolute certainty that the guard froze. "Think about what happens next. You grab her. It's on camera." He gestured at the sea of phones. "And by tonight, you're the villain in a viral video, assault caught on tape. Your employer gets sued. You probably get charged, all because you couldn't accept that someone knew their rights." For a long moment, the tableau held. Nathan could feel his heart pounding. Adrenaline that he'd learned to control but never eliminate. He was aware of Lily watching from the bench, aware of the crowd pressing closer, aware that he'd just inserted himself into a situation that could still go very wrong. The woman took a small step forward, testing. The guards didn't move. She took another step, moving past the thick-necked guard, past Nathan, walking with careful dignity toward the edge of the crowd. "This isn't over," the thick-necked guard called after her, his voice tight with impotent rage. "We're going to review the tapes. You're going to do nothing," Nathan said, turning to face him fully now. "Because there's nothing to review. And if you harass this woman further, if you follow her, if you make any attempt to continue this, I personally will ensure that every news outlet in the city sees the footage of what just happened here." The woman had stopped at the edge of the crowd, turning back. She looked at Nathan, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a slim wallet. She flipped it open. "Since we're discussing authority," she said, her voice now carrying a tone of cold satisfaction, "let me introduce myself. My name is Alexandra Carter. I'm the Vice President of Internal Investigations at Carter Industries." The color drained from the thick-necked guard's face. Nathan saw recognition flash across all three security men's features, recognition and sudden, dawning horror. Carter Industries, one of the largest defense contractors in the nation, a company that probably employed thousands of people in this state alone, a company that almost certainly had contracts with this mall, with the security firm these guards worked for. Alexandra Carter continued, her voice now carrying the unmistakable ring of someone used to being obeyed. And what you've just done, detaining a senior executive of your client company without cause, threatening assault, attempting intimidation, that's going to be included in my report, along with your names. She looked at each guard's name tag deliberately. Richards, Mendez, Foster, got it. Ma'am, we didn't know, the younger guard, Mendez, began. That's not a defense, Alexandra said sharply. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw a woman alone, and you decided you had the power to intimidate her. Well, guess what? You don't. And now you're going to explain to your supervisor why Carter Industries is reviewing its security contracts. She turned to Nathan, and her expression softened fractionally. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Nathan said simply. He was suddenly aware of how tired he felt, the adrenaline beginning to ebb. It was the right thing to do. Still, she pulled out a business card, handed it to him. If you need anything, if there's any fallout from this, you call me. My direct line is on there. Nathan took the card, feeling its expensive weight between his fingers. I don't think there will be any fallout. Alexandra glanced at the 3 security guards, who now stood frozen in various postures of defeated humiliation. No, I suspect there won't be. For you, anyway. She nodded to Nathan, then to the crowd, and walked away. The crowd began to disperse, the show over, people returning to their shopping with the particular buzz of those who'd witnessed drama but hadn't been touched by it. Nathan stood for a moment longer, facing the 3 security guards. You should think about what just happened here, he said quietly, so only they could hear. You had power, or thought you did, and you tried to use it to intimidate someone. That's not security. That's not protection. That's just bullying with a badge. Richards, the thick-necked guard, glared at him. You made us look like fools. No, Nathan said. You did that yourselves. I just stopped you from making it worse. He turned and walked back to the bench where Lily sat, her eyes enormous, her hands gripping the edge of the seat. She launched herself at him the moment he was close enough, wrapping her arms around his waist. Daddy, you were so brave, she whispered into his shirt. You helped that lady, just like a superhero. Nathan knelt down, hugging her properly, feeling the rapid beat of her small heart against his chest. Not a superhero, honey, just a person who knows right from wrong. The guards were bad guys, Lily said with certainty. I knew it. They weren't bad guys exactly, Nathan said, trying to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old. They just forgot that having power means you have to be careful with it. They forgot that everyone deserves to be treated with respect. Will they be in trouble? Probably, Nathan admitted, but maybe they'll learn something from it. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to all moral questions. Then she brightened. Can we still go to the bookstore? Nathan laughed, tension releasing from his shoulders. Yeah, sweetheart, we can still go to the bookstore. They walked together toward the mall's south wing, Lily chattering about the book she wanted to see, about how she was going to tell her friend Emma about how her daddy stood up to the bad security guards, about whether dolphins really could talk or if it was just pretend in the book. Nathan let her talk, responding when appropriate, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Alexandra Carter's expression when he'd asked that question, "Do you consent?" and how something in her eyes had shifted. Recognition of the trap that question created, the logical judo it performed. He was thinking about the business card in his pocket and wondering if he'd ever have reason to call that number. He was thinking about the footage that was probably already being uploaded to TikTok and Twitter and Facebook, about how these moments spread now in ways that would have been impossible just a generation ago. Mostly, he was thinking about how ordinary evil could be. 3 men in uniforms, probably making $15 an hour, who'd gotten used to people being afraid of them. Who'd forgotten, or maybe never learned, that authority without accountability was just another word for tyranny. The bookstore was warm and smelled of paper and coffee. Lily made a beeline for the children's section, her earlier fear already fading into the resilient bounce back that Nathan both envied and treasured in her. He followed more slowly, pulling out his phone to check the time. 2:17. They had maybe another hour before they needed to head home so Lily could do her homework before dinner. Nathan made a mental note of the schedule. Dinner at 6, bath at 7, reading time at 7:30, lights out by 8:15. The structured rhythm of single parenthood, the careful choreography that kept chaos at bay. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Alexandra Carter." It's Alexandra. "I wanted to follow up from the mall incident. Would you be willing to meet for coffee this week? I'd like to thank you properly, and I have some questions about your background. You said you were a Marine?" Nathan stared at the text, surprised. He hadn't expected this. A thank you, maybe, but not a request to meet. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the reply field. "Daddy, look!" Lily's voice called from deeper in the store. "They have the whole series!" "Coming, honey," Nathan called back. He typed a quick response. "I'm free most afternoons. What works for you?" The response came almost immediately. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., there's a cafe called The Drowsy Poet on Westbrook Avenue. I'll be there." Nathan pocketed his phone and went to find his daughter, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of a display of dolphin-themed books, her face radiant with the particular joy that reading brought her. She looked up as he approached. "Daddy, there are 7 books. 7. And they're all about this girl named Marina who can understand what dolphins are saying, and she has to help them save the ocean. And there are bad guys who want to catch the dolphins and—" "Breathe," Nathan said, smiling. "One thing at a time." "Can I get the first one, please? I'll read it super carefully and I'll make it last a whole week." And "Yes," Nathan said. The book was $7.99. He could make that work. "But you have to promise to take care of it." "I promise!" Lily jumped up, clutching the book to her chest like treasure. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you." They walked to the register, Lily chattering nonstop about the book's cover art, about how the dolphin looked so smart and friendly, about how she couldn't wait to start reading it tonight. Nathan paid with cash. He tried to avoid using the credit card unless absolutely necessary, and they left the store with Lily already reading the back cover synopsis aloud. The mall had returned to its normal rhythm, the incident at the fountain already forgotten by most of its witnesses. But Nathan knew better. Those videos were out there now, spreading through the digital ecosystem with the viral inevitability of anything that combined conflict, justice, and a clear moral stance. By tonight, thousands of people would see what had happened. By tomorrow, maybe millions. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. They drove home in his 12-year-old Honda Civic, Lily reading quietly in the back seat, or trying to read, her lips moving silently over the words, her finger tracing the lines. The car needed new tires soon. The check engine light had been on for 3 weeks. Nathan added both to his mental list of things to handle. Their apartment was a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a complex that had been built in the 70s and looked it. The rent was $1,350 a month, which was cheap for the area but still ate up most of Nathan's income from his work as a document reviewer for a legal processing company. The work was mind-numbing, reading through thousands of pages of contracts and emails for litigation cases, but it paid the bills and, more importantly, it let him work from home on a flexible schedule. Sarah's life insurance had helped, but Nathan had put most of that money in a college fund for Lily. Some for emergencies, yes, but the rest was untouchable. Sarah would have wanted that. "Homework time," Nathan announced as they entered the apartment. Lily groaned dramatically but didn't really protest. She was a good kid, responsible beyond her years in some ways. She'd had to grow up fast. While Lily worked on her math worksheet at the kitchen table, Nathan started dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, simple and cheap and Lily's favorite. He moved through the familiar motions, browning the ground beef, pouring the jarred sauce, setting water to boil, and his mind drifted back to the mall. That woman, Alexandra Carter, had been completely calm. Even surrounded, even threatened, she'd maintained that eerie stillness. Nathan recognized it because he'd cultivated something similar during his time in the service. The ability to stay centered when everything was chaos, to think clearly when the brain wanted to panic. It was a survival skill, and it wasn't natural. It was learned. Which meant Alexandra Carter had been in bad situations before. He stirred the sauce, added oregano and garlic powder, and wondered what kind of life left someone that calm under pressure. Vice President of Internal Investigations for a defense contractor. That was serious business. That meant she dealt with fraud, with embezzlement, with all the ways that power and money corrupted even in legitimate industries. The water reached a boil. Nathan added the pasta, set the timer. "Daddy," Lily called from the table, "what's 7 times 8? "What do you think it is?" Nathan called back, the standard parent response. 56? That's right. See? You knew it. I wasn't sure, though. Being unsure but still getting the right answer is better than being sure and getting it wrong, Nathan said. He told her this before, and he'd keep telling her. Confidence was good, but humility was better. They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table, Lily recounting her school day between bites of spaghetti. Who said what at lunch, how Emma got in trouble for talking during math, how their teacher Mrs. Peterson was reading them a chapter book about a mouse who went on adventures. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary, precious kid stuff. After dinner, bath time. Lily played with her bath toys, plastic dolphins now, after seeing them at the bookstore, while Nathan sat on the closed toilet lid and tried not to think about the water bill. Then pajamas, teeth brushing, and the sacred ritual of reading time. They curled up together on Lily's bed, Nathan holding the dolphin book while Lily leaned against his side, her damp hair smelling of strawberry shampoo. He read aloud, doing different voices for the characters, making Lily giggle at his attempt at a dolphin voice. By the time they finished Chapter 2, Lily's eyes were heavy. Nathan turned off the main light, leaving only the small nightlight that cast starfish-shaped shadows on the ceiling. "Daddy," Lily murmured, already half asleep. "What you did today at the mall. Mommy would have been proud." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow, sweet and painful at once. He kissed Lily's forehead. "I hope so, honey. I hope so." "She'd say you were brave." "Your mom was the brave one," Nathan whispered. "She's where you get it from." But Lily was already asleep, her breathing deepening into the profound stillness of childhood rest. Nathan sat for a moment longer, watching her in the dim light, feeling the familiar ache of love and loss tangled together. Then he stood quietly, pulled her blanket up to her shoulders, and left the room, cracking the door just enough to hear her if she called. In the living room, Nathan collapsed onto the couch, a second-hand thing he'd gotten from Craigslist that sagged in the middle but was comfortable enough. He pulled out his phone, almost afraid to look at social media, but knowing he needed to. The video was everywhere. It had been uploaded by at least a dozen different people, from a dozen different angles. The most popular version, posted by someone with the handle @MallWatchdog, had already gotten 3 million views. The caption read, "Single dad destroys security guards trying to illegally detain innocent woman. This is what standing up looks like." Nathan watched the video with a strange sense of detachment, seeing himself from the outside. He looked calmer on camera than he'd felt, his voice steady, his body language controlled. The moment when he asked, "Do you consent to being detained?" had been clipped into its own standalone video, that one already at 5 million views. The comments were overwhelming. "This man is a hero. This is what actual allyship looks like. Not just words, action. The way he stayed calm but firm. That's leadership. Single dad, veteran, knows the law, and stands up for strangers. Someone wife this man up." That last comment made Nathan wince. He wasn't looking for that. He wasn't looking for any of this. There were negative comments too, of course. People saying he was interfering, that he didn't know the whole story, that the woman might actually have been a shoplifter. But those were drowned out by the overwhelming support, by the thousands of people sharing the video with captions about standing up to abuse of power. His phone rang. An actual call, which was rare enough to be alarming. Nathan looked at the screen. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello? Mr. Reed? Nathan Reed?" The voice was male, professional, with a slight accent Nathan couldn't place. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Gerald Whitman. I'm the CEO of Carter Industries." Nathan sat up straighter, suddenly very alert. Okay. How can I help you?" "I saw the video from the mall today," Whitman said. "I've already spoken with Ms. Carter, and I wanted to personally thank you for your intervention. The behavior of those security guards was completely unacceptable, and I'm told you handled the situation with remarkable composure." "I just asked a question," Nathan said, uncomfortable with the praise. You asked the right question at the right time, Whitman replied. That takes intelligence and courage. I understand you're a veteran. Marines, 6 years, then a year with JAG before I left the service. May I ask why you left? Nathan hesitated. This was not a conversation he wanted to have with a stranger, even a CEO. Personal reasons, family needs. Fair enough. There was a pause. Mr. Reed, I'm calling because I think you're exactly the kind of person I'm looking for. Carter Industries has a position opening up. Internal security consultant. It would involve reviewing protocols, ensuring compliance with civil rights standards, training security personnel. Someone with your background, your legal knowledge, and clearly your moral compass would be invaluable. Nathan's mind raced. Mr. Whitman, I appreciate the offer, but I don't know anything about your company beyond what I saw today. Then let's change that. Meet with Alexandra tomorrow. I know she's already arranged coffee. Talk to her. Learn about what we do. Then, if you're interested, we'll talk specifics. No pressure. Just a conversation. Nathan tried to find words. I have a daughter. I need flexible hours. I need to be able to work from home sometimes. That can be arranged, Whitman said immediately. We're interested in your expertise, not in chaining you to a desk. Why? Nathan asked bluntly. Why me? You don't know me. I know what I saw in that video, Whitman replied. I know you stood up when 40 other people stayed silent. I know you understood the law well enough to articulate it clearly under pressure. And I know that Ms. Carter, whose judgment I trust implicitly, was impressed enough to reach out to you herself. That's enough for me to start a conversation. Nathan rubbed his eyes. This day had gone from ordinary to surreal in a matter of hours. I'll meet with Ms. Carter tomorrow, but I'm not making any promises beyond that. That's all I'm asking. Thank you, Mr. Reed, and thank you for what you did today. It matters more than you might realize. The call ended. Nathan sat in the dim living room, his phone still in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. A job offer. From a major defense contractor. Because of a 2-minute confrontation in a mall. He pulled up his laptop, typed Carter Industries into Google. The results were extensive. A company with 40 years of history contracts with the Department of Defense worth hundreds of millions, manufacturing facilities in 6 states. They made everything from tactical communications equipment to drone components to armored vehicle parts, defense contractors. Nathan had dealt with them during his time in JAG, had seen both the good and the bad. Companies that supported the mission and kept soldiers safe, and companies that cut corners and filed fraudulent claims and cared more about profit margins than the people using their equipment. He clicked on a news article from 3 months ago. Carter Industries faces inquiry over defective radio equipment. Another article, older. Whistleblower claims Carter Industries sold substandard body armor components. Nathan's jaw tightened. So there were problems. Every large defense contractor had problems. The question was whether they were systematic or isolated, whether the company addressed them or covered them up. Maybe that's why Alexandra Carter was vice president of internal investigations. Maybe she was part of the solution, or maybe Nathan was being naive. He closed the laptop, too tired to think clearly anymore. Tomorrow he'd meet with Alexandra Carter. He'd ask questions. He'd listen carefully, not just to what she said, but to what she didn't say. He'd trust his instincts, which had kept him alive in worse situations than a corporate meeting. But tonight, he was just tired. Nathan checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping peacefully, her new book on the nightstand, then went to his own room. The walls were bare except for a single photograph. Him and Sarah on their wedding day, young and impossibly happy, believing they had all the time in the world. I don't know what I'm doing, Nathan said softly to the photograph, to the ghost of his wife, to the universe. I'm just trying to do the right thing. The photograph, of course, didn't answer. But Nathan thought, maybe imagined, that Sarah would understand, that she'd tell him to trust his gut, to be brave, to remember that doing the right thing was never the easy thing, but it was always the necessary thing. He fell asleep thinking about gray eyes and a woman who stood perfectly still while the world threatened her, and about his daughter's small voice asking, "Are they bad guys, Daddy?" and about the weight of Alexandra Carter's business card in his wallet. Tomorrow, he thought as sleep claimed him, tomorrow we'll see what this is really about. In the morning, Nathan would wake to find the video had reached 10 million views. He'd find interview requests from local news stations, messages from veterans organizations, DMs from people calling him a hero. He'd ignore most of them, make breakfast for Lily, take her to school, come home and try to focus on his work reviewing contracts and depositions for faceless corporations. But even as he went through those ordinary motions, a part of him would know that something had shifted, that the question he'd asked in the mall, "Do you consent?" had opened a door he couldn't close. That Alexandra Carter represented something larger than a chance encounter, something that connected to his past in ways he didn't yet understand. And he'd think about Gerald Whitman's words, "It matters more than you might realize." Nathan had learned in the Marines that small decisions could have enormous consequences, that a moment's courage or cowardice could determine whether people lived or died, whether missions succeeded or failed, whether justice was served or denied. He just hadn't expected that lesson to follow him to a shopping mall on an ordinary Saturday. But then, Nathan thought, as sleep finally, fully claimed him, courage had never been about choosing the dramatic moments. It had always been about showing up when it mattered, even, especially, when you didn't know the full cost of doing so. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only rest, hard-earned and necessary, in the small apartment where a single father and his daughter built their quiet life, one ordinary day at a time. Until those days stopped being ordinary, until a simple question changed everything. Do you consent? The morning light came too early, filtering through the cheap blinds in Nathan's bedroom with that particular quality of autumn sunshine, bright but not warm, promising a day that would start cold and maybe warm up by afternoon. He lay still for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of the apartment building waking up, water running through pipes, a door slamming somewhere below, the distant rumble of traffic on the main road. His phone was already buzzing before he reached for it. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages. His email inbox showed 92 unread messages. Nathan scrolled through them with growing disbelief. News stations requesting interviews, podcast hosts wanting him as a guest, a literary agent asking if he'd ever considered writing a book, veterans organizations inviting him to speak at events. The video had exploded overnight. The main version now had 23 million views. 23 million. Nathan tried to wrap his mind around that number and couldn't. That was more people than lived in most states. That was a significant fraction of the entire country, all watching him ask a simple question in a shopping mall. He checked the trending topics on Twitter. There it was, number 4 nationwide. How do you consent? People were using his question as a rallying cry against abuse of power, posting their own stories of standing up to authority, creating memes and graphics and debate threads about civil rights and the limits of private security. Some lawyer had posted a 10-minute video breaking down the legal principles Nathan had cited, calling it a masterclass in de-escalation through knowledge. A criminology professor had written a thread analyzing the power dynamics, praising Nathan's tactical empathy. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was completely contrary to everything Nathan wanted, which was to be left alone to raise his daughter in peace. "Daddy?" Lily's voice called from her room. "Are you awake?" "I'm up, sweetheart," Nathan called back, setting the phone down with relief. Here, at least, was something simple and real. "Come here." Lily appeared in his doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess from sleep. She climbed onto his bed and burrowed into his side, warm and solid and infinitely precious. "Did you sleep okay?" Nathan asked, wrapping an arm around her. "I had a dream about dolphins," Lily said. "They could really talk, like in my book, and they told me secrets about the ocean." "What kind of secrets?" "Where all the treasure is hidden." Lily's voice was dreamy, still half in the memory of the dream. "And where the mermaids live, and why the ocean is salty." "Why is the ocean salty?" Nathan asked, playing along. "Because the mermaids cry when they're sad, and their tears are made of salt," Lily said seriously. "The dolphins told me." Nathan smiled, kissed the top of her head. "Those are some very wise dolphins." They lay together for a few more minutes, and Nathan tried to hold on to this moment, to remember that whatever chaos was happening in the digital world, this was what actually mattered. This small person who still believed in mermaids and talking dolphins, who trusted him completely, who depended on him for everything. Eventually they got up, went through the morning routine. Breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. Getting dressed, Lily insisted on wearing her dolphin shirt, packing her backpack, making sure she had her homework and her lunch money, the ordinary choreography that structured their days. "Daddy?" Lily said as Nathan was helping her with her jacket. "Are you famous now?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Emma's mom texted my tablet last night. She said you're on the news, that lots of people are watching the video of you helping that lady." Lily looked up at him with those enormous eyes. "Are you?" Nathan knelt down to her level. "Some people saw what happened at the mall, and they shared it with other people. But I'm not famous, honey. I'm just your dad. Emma's mom said you're a hero." "Emma's mom is very kind," Nathan said carefully. "But what I did wasn't hero stuff. It was just the right thing to do. Anybody could have done it." "But they didn't," Lily pointed out with perfect 7-year-old logic. "You did." Nathan had no answer to that. He just hugged her, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, and wished the world was simpler. The drive to Lily's school took 15 minutes. Nathan walked her to the front entrance, as he always did, but today felt different. Other parents were looking at him, whispering. One woman, Emma's mother, he realized, actually approached him. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice warm, "I just wanted to say thank you for what you did yesterday. My husband and I watched the video last night, and we were both so impressed. You're exactly the kind of role model we need more of." "I appreciate that," Nathan said, uncomfortable with the attention. "But really, You stood up when others didn't," Emma's mother interrupted. "That matters. That really matters." Nathan nodded, not trusting himself to say more. Lily was tugging on his hand, wanting to go find Emma. He let her go, watched her run into the building with her backpack bouncing, and tried to ignore the feeling that his life was spinning out of his control. Back at the apartment, Nathan tried to focus on work. He had 300 pages of contract review to complete by Friday, tedious stuff involving intellectual property disputes in the tech sector. He opened the files, started reading, but his mind kept drifting. At 2:30, he saved his work and changed clothes. Nothing fancy, just clean jeans and a button-down shirt, but he wanted to look presentable for the meeting with Alexandra Carter. He had no idea what to expect from this conversation, what she wanted beyond a thank you, what it might mean for his carefully structured life. The Drowsy Poet was a small cafe on a quiet street, the kind of place that served $12 lattes and had mismatched furniture that was supposed to look vintage, but probably just came from estate sales. Nathan arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a black coffee, $3, which was still ridiculous, and found a table near the back. Alexandra Carter walked in exactly at 3 o'clock. She looked different than she had at the mall, less guarded somehow. She wore dark slacks and a gray sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She spotted Nathan immediately and walked over with a slight smile. "Mr. Reed," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for meeting me." "Nathan, please," he said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "And thank you for the invitation, though I have to admit I'm not entirely sure what this is about." "Honestly?" Alexandra sat down across from him, setting her own coffee on the table. "Neither am I, completely. I wanted to thank you, obviously, but I also wanted to understand who you are." "I'm nobody," Nathan said simply. "A single dad trying to get by." "You're a Marine veteran with legal training who stayed calm under pressure and knew exactly how to defuse a situation that could have turned violent," Alexandra countered. "That's not nobody. That's someone with very specific skills and experience." Nathan sipped his coffee, studying her. "Gerald Whitman called me last night, offered me a job I didn't apply for." "I know. I recommended it." Alexandra's gray eyes met his steadily. "But before we talk about that, I want to know something. Why did you step in yesterday?" "The truth." "I told you the truth. It was the right thing to do." "Most people don't do the right thing," Alexandra said. "Most people pull out their phones and watch. You got involved. Why?" Nathan thought about how to answer that, how much to reveal to this stranger who wasn't quite a stranger anymore. "My daughter asked me if those security guards were bad guys, and I realized she was right, not in a cartoon villain way, but in the way that matters. They were using power they didn't have to intimidate someone who couldn't fight back. If I'd walked away, what would I have been teaching her?" Something shifted in Alexandra's expression, a softening that suggested he'd said something important. You have a daughter, Lily, right? I saw her in the video waiting on the bench. 7 years old, best thing in my life. Her mother? Died 3 years ago, cancer. Nathan's voice was flat, the way it always was when he talked about Sarah. Emotion was easier to manage when you kept it locked down tight. I'm sorry. Alexandra's sympathy sounded genuine. That must be incredibly difficult. We manage, Nathan deflected, but you didn't ask me here to talk about my family situation. What do you want, Ms. Carter? Alexandra, and I want to know if you're interested in that job offer. She pulled out a folder from her bag, set it on the table between them. This is preliminary information about Carter Industries, what we do, who we are, the position Gerald mentioned. But before you look at it, I need to tell you something. Nathan waited. The situation at the mall yesterday wasn't random, Alexandra said quietly. I was at that mall because I was following up on a lead. We've had reports of security personnel at various client sites using intimidation tactics, demanding illegal searches, threatening people. I wanted to see it firsthand. You set yourself up as bait, Nathan said, understanding. I did. And it worked, though not quite the way I expected. Alexandra's smile was wry. I thought I'd gather evidence, file a report, get the company to review its contracts. What I didn't expect was someone to actually intervene, or to articulate the legal principles so clearly that 3 trained security guards backed down. They weren't trained, Nathan said. Not properly. Anyone with real law enforcement training would have known better. Exactly. Which is the problem. Alexandra leaned forward slightly. Nathan, Carter Industries has contracts with dozens of security firms. We employ thousands of security personnel at our facilities, and I'm increasingly convinced that many of them don't understand the legal limits of their authority. They think a uniform gives them power, and nobody corrects them until something goes wrong. So you want me to what? Train them? I want you to help me build a program that ensures this never happens again, Alexandra said. Training, yes, but also protocols, accountability measures, regular audits. Someone who understands both the legal framework and the practical reality of security work. Nathan picked up the folder, flipped through it. Job description, salary range. His eyes widened at the numbers. Benefits package, flexible scheduling options. It was everything Gerald Whitman had promised and more. This is generous, Nathan said slowly. Suspiciously generous for someone you just met. You think it's too good to be true. I think I don't understand why you'd trust someone you know nothing about with this much responsibility. Alexandra was quiet for a moment, and Nathan had the sense she was deciding how much to tell him. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. 6 months ago, I started investigating irregularities in our supply chain. Components that didn't meet specifications, documentation that didn't match actual products, audit trails that seemed incomplete. The deeper I dug, the more I found, and the more resistance I faced. From inside the company, Nathan said. It wasn't a question. From very high up inside the company, Alexandra confirmed. I reported my findings to Gerald Whitman directly, bypassing the usual channels. He authorized a full internal investigation, gave me authority to pursue it wherever it led. But I need help. I need people I can trust, people who haven't been compromised by the system. And you think I'm that person because I asked a question in a mall. I think you're that person because you saw injustice and acted on it, even though you had nothing to gain and potentially something to lose, Alexandra said. I think you're that person because you understand the law but also understand people. And I think you're that person because you walked away from the Marines, which suggests you have lines you won't cross even when ordered to. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. What do you know about why I left? Nothing specific, but I can guess. Alexandra's voice was gentle now. Someone with your training, your record, you don't just walk away unless something fundamental breaks. You saw something you couldn't live with, or you were asked to do something you couldn't stomach. Either way, you chose principle over career. She was right, of course. Nathan had left the Marines after a year in JAG because he'd been ordered to help cover up a contractor fraud case, falsified test results on body armor that had subsequently failed in combat, resulting in Marine casualties. He'd refused, threatened to go to Congress with what he knew, and been given a choice: resign quietly with an honorable discharge or face court-martial on manufactured charges. He'd resigned. And he'd spent the last 6 years wondering if he'd made the right choice, if he could have done more, if those Marines would still be alive if he'd fought harder. "You're asking me to walk back into that world," Nathan said quietly. "Defense contractors, military supplies, all of it." "I'm asking you to help me clean it up," Alexandra countered, "from the inside where it actually matters." Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her expression that he recognized from his own mirror. Determination born from witnessing something intolerable, the kind of resolve that came from knowing the cost of inaction. "What did you find?" he asked. "In your investigation? What's at the center of it?" Alexandra glanced around the cafe, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. "Defective components, military-grade electronics that were returned under warranty, then refurbished and resold as new. Except the refurbishment was cosmetic only. They still had the original flaws that caused the returns. And those components ended up in combat communication systems." Nathan felt ice slide down his spine. People could die from that. People probably have died from that. I just can't prove it yet. Alexandra's voice was tight with controlled anger. "The paper trail has been scrubbed, purchase orders altered, inspection reports modified, warranty claims that should exist simply missing from the database. Someone very sophisticated is covering their tracks." "Who?" "That's what I'm trying to find out. I have suspicions, but suspicions aren't evidence. I need help building a case that will stand up to legal scrutiny." Alexandra met his eyes. "I need someone who understands military procurement fraud, who knows how to document evidence, who can't be intimidated or bought off. Based on what I saw yesterday and what Gerald found out about your background, I think that person is you." Nathan sat back, his mind racing through the implications. This wasn't just a job offer. This was an invitation into a war, a quiet bureaucratic war fought with documents and regulations and the slow machinery of justice, but a war nonetheless. Against people with resources, with power, with everything to lose if they were exposed. "I have a daughter," Nathan said. "She's the only thing that matters to me. If I do this, if I get involved, I can't put her at risk." "I understand that. Gerald understands that. We can arrange security if needed." "Security?" Nathan's voice sharpened. "You're talking about my 7-year-old needing security?" "I'm talking about being prepared for every possibility," Alexandra said calmly. "These are powerful people, Nathan. People who've already demonstrated they're willing to commit fraud that endangers soldiers' lives. I won't lie to you and say there's no risk, but I will promise you that we'll do everything possible to keep you and Lily safe." Nathan's phone buzzed. A text from the school. "Lily had a great day. She's been telling everyone about her hero daddy, Mrs. Peterson." He stared at the message, thinking about his daughter's face when she'd asked if the security guards were bad guys, about how she'd called him brave, about the dolphin book she was reading and the ordinary, precious life they'd built together. Then he thought about Marines dying because of defective equipment, about the case he'd been ordered to bury, about all the times he'd chosen safety over courage since then. "I need to think about this," Nathan said finally. "I need to consider what it means for Lily, for our life. I can't make this decision based on emotion." "That's fair," Alexandra said. "Take your time." "But Nathan, the people doing this, they're not going to stop. They're making millions while soldiers pay the price. Someone has to stand up to them. And you think that someone is me." "I think you already know how to stand up," Alexandra said quietly. "Yesterday proved that. The question is whether you're willing to do it again, in a bigger arena, with higher stakes." They talked for another hour, Alexandra answering Nathan's questions about the company, the investigation, the resources available, the timeline. She was thorough, honest about the challenges, clear about the support he'd have. By the time they left the cafe, Nathan had a much better sense of what he was being offered and what it would cost. That evening, after picking up Lily from school and listening to her excited recap of her day, after dinner and homework and bath time, after reading another chapter about Marina and her dolphin friends, Nathan sat alone in his living room and opened his laptop. He searched for Carter Industries military equipment failure. The results were extensive: news articles, congressional testimony, whistleblower complaints going back years. He found the case he had worked on buried in a 2018 report from the Defense Contract Audit Agency. Substandard body armor plates manufactured by Carter Industries' subsidiary resulted in combat fatalities. The report had been classified. Nathan had been one of the few people with access to the full findings. He'd recommended criminal charges. His superiors had recommended a financial settlement and a slap-on-the-wrist administrative penalty. He'd resigned the next week. Now, 6 years later, someone was asking him to go back, to do what he'd been prevented from doing before, to actually fight instead of walking away. Nathan pulled up the video from the mall, watched himself ask that question. "Do you consent to being detained?" 5 words that had changed everything. His phone rang. Alexandra Carter. "I know you said you needed time," she said when he answered. "But something's happened. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Early?" "How early?" 7 a.m. "There's a diner called Rosie's on 5th Street. "What happened?" Alexandra's voice was tense. "Someone broke into my office tonight. They didn't take anything obvious, but files were disturbed. Specifically, files related to the supply chain investigation. Someone knows I'm looking, Nathan, and they're getting nervous." Nathan felt the old familiar rush of adrenaline, the sharpening of senses that came with recognizing a threat. "Are you safe?" "I'm fine. I'm at home. Doors locked, security system active. But this confirms what I suspected. We're dealing with people who are willing to cross lines, which means I need to know, are you in or are you out? Because if you're in, we need to move fast. And if you're out, I need to find someone else." Nathan looked at the photograph of Sarah on the wall, at the door to Lily's room where his daughter slept peacefully, at the simple apartment that represented everything he'd built after walking away from his principles. He thought about the question Lily had asked, "Are they bad guys?" He thought about the Marines who died wearing defective armor while bureaucrats covered up the evidence. He thought about Alexandra Carter standing alone in that mall, surrounded by men who thought their uniforms gave them the right to intimidate her. "I'm in," Nathan said, "but we do this my way. Everything documented, everything legal, everything by the book. No shortcuts, no compromises. We build a case that's airtight." He could hear the relief in Alexandra's voice. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Tomorrow morning then, 7 a.m. "I'll be there." Nathan hung up and sat in the silence of his apartment, feeling the weight of what he'd just committed to. This was bigger than a confrontation in a mall. This was choosing to fight a system that had already beaten him once, that had the resources and connections to destroy anyone who challenged it. But this time, he wouldn't be alone. This time, he had Alexandra Carter, who'd been conducting her own investigation, building her own case. This time, he had Gerald Whitman's support, resources from the top of the company. This time, maybe things could be different. Nathan checked on Lily one more time before going to bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, one arm hanging off the edge, her dolphin book clutched to her chest even in sleep. He straightened her blanket, moved the book to the nightstand, and stood watching her breathe. "I'm going to make this better," he whispered. "For you, for all the kids whose parents don't come home, because someone decided profits mattered more than lives. I'm going to try, anyway." Lily stirred, murmured something about dolphins, then settled back into deep sleep. Nathan went to his room and lay awake for a long time, thinking about the path he'd just chosen, about the risks and the potential consequences. His phone continued to buzz with notifications, more interview requests, more messages from people who'd seen the video, more strangers telling him he was a hero. But Nathan didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who'd spent 6 years hiding from a fight he should have finished, who'd chosen safety over justice, who'd let fear for his daughter's future override his responsibility to do what was right. Maybe that was about to change. The video from the mall now had 35 million views. People across the country, across the world, were sharing it, discussing it, using it as an example of how one person could make a difference. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know about the investigation, about the defective military equipment, about the Marines who died, or the cover-up that had driven Nathan from the service. But they would. If he and Alexandra succeeded, if they built their case and brought it to light, the world would know. The people responsible would face consequences. The system that had protected them would be forced to change, or they would fail, and everything would stay the same. The fraud would continue, more soldiers would die with defective equipment, and Nathan would have risked his daughter's safety for nothing. Those were the only two options. There was no middle ground, no partial victory. Either they won completely, or they lost everything. Nathan finally drifted off to sleep sometime after 2 a.m., his dreams filled with fragmented images. Marines in combat gear, defective armor cracking under impact, Alexandra Carter standing in a circle of security guards, Lily asking if they were bad guys, and his own voice, clear and calm, asking the question that started it all. Do you consent? In the morning, everything would change. The quiet life he'd built would be over, replaced by something dangerous and uncertain and necessary. He would become part of a fight that had been going on long before he stepped into that mall. A fight against corruption and greed and the kind of evil that wore suits and hid behind corporate structures. But for now, in these last hours of peace, Nathan slept in his small apartment, his daughter safe in the next room, both of them unaware of the storm that was coming. The viral video continued to spread through the night, reaching new audiences, sparking new conversations, becoming part of the cultural zeitgeist in that mysterious way that certain moments do. By morning, it would be everywhere, referenced in news broadcasts, analyzed in think pieces, memed and remixed and transformed into something larger than itself. And at the center of it all was one question, 5 simple words that had somehow captured something essential about power and consent and the courage to challenge authority. Do you consent to being detained? The world had answered with a resounding no. Now Nathan Reed and Alexandra Carter were about to find out what that answer really meant, what it would cost to enforce it, and whether two people with nothing but truth on their side could stand against a system designed to protect the guilty. Morning came too quickly, as it always did. Nathan woke to his alarm at 6 a.m., moved through the routine of getting ready in the pre-dawn darkness. He made coffee, left a note for Lily explaining he had an early meeting and that Mrs. Chen from next door would take her to school, and drove through empty streets toward Rosie's diner. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day. Nathan wondered if that was a good omen or just the universe's sense of irony, that the day everything changed would start with perfect weather. Alexandra was already at the diner when he arrived, sitting in a corner booth with coffee and what looked like a folder full of documents. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much either, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Nathan slid into the booth across from her. "Show me what you've got." And Alexandra Carter, Vice President of Internal Investigations for Carter Industries, opened the folder and began to explain exactly how deep the corruption went, how many people were involved, and what it would take to bring them all down. The war had begun. Alexandra spread the documents across the worn Formica table, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. The diner smelled of coffee and bacon grease, and the fluorescent lights cast everything in that particular harsh clarity of early morning. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes tracking the papers as she arranged them in what was clearly a deliberate sequence. "This is Victor Reynolds," Alexandra said, tapping a photograph of a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that screamed executive power. "Senior Vice President of Operations. He's been with Carter Industries for 23 years, worked his way up from middle management. On paper, he's brilliant, increased efficiency by 30%, secured major contracts, saved the company millions in operational costs." "And off paper?" Nathan asked, already sensing where this was going. "Off paper, he's a sociopath with a gift for making numbers look good." Alexandra's voice was cold, clinical. Every efficiency gain came from cutting corners. Every cost saving came from using substandard materials. Every major contract was secured by underbidding competitors, then making up the difference by delivering inferior products. She pulled out another document, this one dense with spreadsheet data. "These are component tracking records from 2019 through 2023. See these serial numbers?" Her finger traced a column of alphanumeric codes. "These are military-grade radio components that were returned under warranty due to catastrophic failures in field testing. According to protocol, they should have been destroyed or sent back to the original manufacturer for analysis." "But they weren't," Nathan said, his jaw tightening as he followed the data trail. They were refurbished by a subsidiary company called Apex Technical Solutions. Except Apex Technical Solutions is a shell corporation owned by a holding company that's partially owned by Victor Reynolds through his wife's trust fund. Alexandra pulled out more papers showing the corporate ownership structure. The components went to Apex, got cleaned up cosmetically, received new identification numbers, and were resold to Carter Industries as new parts, which then went into communication systems that were deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest. How many units? 17,000 components across 4 years. Conservative estimate of actual deployment puts about 8,000 units in active combat zones. Alexandra's voice remained steady, but Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the papers slightly too tight. We've identified at least 43 incidents of communication failure during combat operations in that time frame. Some were attributed to environmental factors, some to user error, but I think they were equipment failures caused by these defective components. 43 incidents. Nathan's mind was already calculating, remembering his own time in combat zones, understanding what communication failure meant. How many casualties? Confirmed, 12 KIA, 37 wounded. But those are just the incidents where communication failure was specifically noted in after-action reports. The actual number is probably higher. Alexandra met his eyes. People died, Nathan. Marines, soldiers, sailors. They died because Victor Reynolds wanted to pad his profit margins. The rage that flashed through Nathan was white-hot and immediately controlled. He'd learned long ago that anger was only useful if you directed it, shaped it into something productive. What physical evidence do you have? Documentation trail? That's the problem. Alexandra pulled out another stack of papers, these marked with red tabs. The original warranty claims exist. I found them in archived databases. But the chain of custody records for those components are gone, deleted from the primary systems, and the backup archives were corrupted during a server migration 2 years ago. The purchase orders from Apex show only generic component descriptions, nothing linking them to the returned units, and the quality control inspections for the new components were all signed off by the same 3 inspectors who've since left the company. Let me guess, Nathan said. Generous severance packages, non-disclosure agreements, and they're now untraceable? 2 moved overseas, 1 died in a car accident 6 months after leaving. Alexandra's expression was grim. I've been trying to build a case for 6 months, and every time I get close to something solid, the evidence disappears or the witnesses become unavailable. Nathan studied the documents, his mind working through the implications. This wasn't just corporate fraud. This was a systematic cover-up involving multiple people, significant resources, and a level of sophistication that suggested planning and coordination. You said someone broke into your office last night. What were they after? These, Alexandra gestured at the papers spread between them. Or at least the digital versions. I keep everything backed up in 3 places. My office computer, a secure cloud server, and a physical drive that I keep at home. They got into my office system, but I don't think they found the cloud backup. Not yet, anyway. How did you secure the cloud server? Through a personal account, not company infrastructure. It's not perfect, but it's better than keeping everything on company servers where Reynolds or his people could access it. Alexandra paused, took a sip of her coffee. The break-in tells me we're running out of time. They know I'm investigating. They know I'm close to something, and they're getting desperate. Nathan pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app. Okay, let's approach this systematically. What we need is a case that's ironclad, evidence that can't be disputed, witnesses who can corroborate, documentation that establishes both the fraud and the cover-up. We build it layer by layer until there's no way for them to wiggle out. That's what I've been trying to do, but you've been doing it alone, Nathan interrupted gently. And you've been doing it while still working inside the company, where Reynolds can watch your movements, track your access to databases, monitor who you're talking to. We need to change the approach. What are you suggesting? Nathan thought for a moment, pulling together everything he'd learned in JAG, every investigation he'd worked on or witnessed. We go external, federal authorities, the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, the FBI's Fraud Division, maybe even the Inspector General's office at the Pentagon. We bring them in with what you have, get them to open an official investigation. Once that happens, Reynolds can't touch the evidence because it's protected under federal law. Alexandra shook her head. I tried that 3 months ago. Submitted everything to DCIS through their online portal. Never heard back. Either it got buried in bureaucracy or someone on Reynolds' payroll made sure it never went anywhere. Then we go higher. We go public. Nathan saw Alexandra's eyes widen. Not with everything, not with details that could compromise an investigation, but with enough to force action. We leak the basic story to a journalist who specializes in defense contractor fraud. Once it's in the news, once there's public pressure, the authorities have to respond. That's risky, Alexandra said slowly. If we go public before we have an airtight case, Reynolds will have time to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, build his own defense. We might lose our only chance. And if we wait until we have an airtight case, we might end up dead, Nathan said bluntly. That break-in last night was a warning. The next step is direct action against you, against anyone helping you. We need to move fast, and we need to make sure our survival is tied to the information getting out. If something happens to us, the story goes public automatically. Alexandra considered this, her analytical mind clearly working through scenarios and probabilities. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but we need more first. We need at least one witness who will go on record, someone who can directly connect Reynolds to the fraud. And we need the smoking gun, something that proves beyond doubt that he knew the components were defective and authorized their reuse anyway. Do you have candidates for the witness? Maybe. There's a retired quality control manager named Marcus Webb. He left the company 5 years ago, before the big severance packages and NDAs became standard. He was one of the people who initially flagged the component failures. I've reached out to him twice, but he won't talk to me. Says he's done with Carter Industries, wants nothing to do with it. Let me try, Nathan said. Sometimes a different approach works. What about the smoking gun? That's harder. If it exists, it's probably in Reynolds' personal files, emails, memos, something that shows he was aware of the fraud. But his office is in the executive suite, high security, monitored access. I can't just walk in and search his computer. Nathan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he pulled out the business card Gerald Whitman had given him. What if we bring Whitman in, tell him everything, get his authorization to investigate Reynolds directly? I've thought about that, Alexandra admitted. But I don't know if we can trust him completely. He's the CEO. He has to have known something was wrong. The question is whether he was willfully blind or actively complicit. You said he authorized your investigation. He did. But that might just be him covering his own ass, making sure he looks clean when this blows up. I need more time to figure out where his loyalties really are. Nathan understood the caution. In his experience, the higher you went in any organization, the murkier the ethics became. Good people made compromises, decent people looked the other way. And the truly corrupt learned to insulate themselves with layers of plausible deniability. All right, Nathan said. We work on 2 tracks simultaneously. I'll approach Marcus Webb, see if I can get him to talk. You focus on finding that smoking gun, but carefully. No direct access to Reynolds' office until we have better security. In the meantime, we document everything we have, create multiple backups, and establish a dead man's switch. If something happens to either of us, the information goes to 3 journalists and 2 federal agencies automatically. How do we set that up? I know a guy. Former Marine, works in cybersecurity now. He owes me a favor. Nathan was already typing a message on his phone. He can set up an encrypted drop system that triggers if we don't check in every 48 hours. Alexandra looked at him with something like respect. You've thought about this before, this kind of contingency planning. I spent a year investigating military contractor fraud before I left the service, Nathan said. I learned a lot about how these cases fall apart, how witnesses disappear, how evidence gets destroyed. I also learned that the best protection is to make yourself more valuable alive than dead. If we're the only ones who know where all the evidence is, we're targets. If the evidence is already distributed and our deaths would just trigger its release, we're liabilities. That's dark. That's survival. Nathan met her eyes. Are you ready for how bad this could get? Because once we start down this path, there's no backing out. Reynolds will come at us with everything he has. Legal threats, intimidation, maybe worse. Your career at Carter Industries is probably over no matter how this plays out. You need to be certain this is worth it. Alexandra didn't hesitate. 12 confirmed dead, Nathan. Probably more. Marines and soldiers who went into combat trusting their equipment, who died because someone decided their lives were worth less than a profit margin. Yes, I'm certain. They spent the next 2 hours going through every document Alexandra had brought, Nathan taking notes, asking questions, building a mental framework of the case. By the time they left the diner, the sun was fully up and the morning rush hour had begun. Nathan had 3 pages of notes, a list of 12 people to interview, and a growing sense that they were racing against a clock they couldn't see. He drove home to find Mrs. Chen from next door sitting in his living room, reading a magazine. She looked up as he entered, her weathered face breaking into a smile. Lily got off to school fine, Mrs. Chen said in her accented English. She talked about dolphins whole time, very excited about that book. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I really appreciate you helping out. Nathan pulled out his wallet, but the older woman waved him off. No money. We are neighbors. We help each other. She stood, gathering her things. But Nathan, I must tell you something. This morning, when I come to take Lily to school, there was a man outside, in a car, watching your building. Nathan felt his alertness spike. What kind of car? What did he look like? Black car, big, expensive looking. The man, I don't see him well. He wears sunglasses, dark jacket. When I look at him, he drive away. Mrs. Chen's expression was worried. Maybe nothing, but after I see that video of you, after I see you are famous now, I think maybe someone watching you, maybe not good people. Thank you for telling me, Nathan said, keeping his voice calm even as his mind raced. If you see him again or anyone else watching, you call me immediately, okay? And don't approach them. Mrs. Chen nodded, still looking concerned, but she left without further questions. Nathan immediately went to his window, scanning the street below. No black cars, no obvious surveillance. But that didn't mean much. If Reynolds had already started watching him, they'd be good at staying invisible. He pulled out his phone, called Alexandra. We have a problem. There was surveillance outside my apartment this morning. Are you sure? My neighbor saw someone watching the building in a black sedan. Could be nothing, could be Reynolds' people checking me out. Nathan moved away from the window. Either way, we need to assume we're being monitored now. Cell phones, emails, physical locations, everything. Damn it. Alexandra's frustration was clear. I was hoping we'd have more time before they made that connection. The video made me visible. Anyone who wants to know who I am and where I live can find out in 5 minutes of internet searching. Nathan was already thinking through the implications. We need to be smarter about communication. Burner phones, encrypted apps, face-to-face meetings only in public places where we can spot surveillance. This is escalating faster than I expected. It always does, Nathan said grimly. Listen, I'm going to pick up Lily from school myself today. Make sure she's safe. Then I'm going to visit Marcus Webb, see if I can convince him to talk. You focus on staying safe and keeping your evidence secure. We'll meet again tomorrow, same place, same time. And Alexandra, watch your back. You too. Nathan spent the rest of the day working from home, trying to focus on his contract review job, but finding his mind constantly drifting to the investigation, to the surveillance, to the growing sense that he'd stepped into something far more dangerous than a simple fraud case. He left early to pick up Lily, arriving at her school 20 minutes before dismissal, scanning the parking lot and surrounding streets for anything unusual. Nothing obvious. But that didn't ease his tension. Lily came bounding out when the bell rang, her backpack bouncing, her face bright with the uncomplicated joy of being 7 years old. Daddy, you're here early! Thought we'd get ice cream on the way home, Nathan said, taking her hand and walking quickly toward the car. How was school? Good. We learned about ocean animals and science and Mrs. Peterson said dolphins are actually really smart, like almost as smart as people. And Lily chattered happily as Nathan buckled her in, did a final scan of the area, then got behind the wheel. He took a circuitous route home, watching his mirrors for any vehicle that stayed with them too long. Nothing. Maybe Mrs. Chen had been mistaken. Maybe it was just someone who'd seen the video and was curious. Maybe he was being paranoid. Or maybe Reynolds' people were just better at surveillance than Nathan was at spotting it. They got ice cream, chocolate for Lily, vanilla for Nathan, and sat at an outdoor table. Nathan let his daughter talk about her day, about her friends, about the dolphin book she was reading, all while his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, looking for threats, calculating escape routes, the old combat awareness that never quite went away. "Daddy, you're not listening," Lily said, her voice holding that particular note of hurt that children get when they realize their parents are distracted. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I'm listening now. Tell me again about the science project." Lily regarded him with those too perceptive eyes. "Is something wrong? Are you worried about something?" Nathan hesitated, trying to find the balance between honesty and not frightening her. "I'm working on something important for work. It's taking up a lot of my thinking space, but that's not your problem, okay? You're not doing anything wrong." "Is it about the lady from the mall?" "Sort of, but it's adult stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." Lily took a bite of her ice cream, considering this. Then she said, very seriously, "Mommy used to say that when grown-ups say don't worry, it usually means there's something to worry about, but they don't want kids to be scared." The observation hit Nathan like a punch. Sarah had been right, and Lily had inherited her mother's sharp perception. "Your mom was a very smart woman. Okay, yes. There's something I'm dealing with at work that's complicated. But I promise you I'm being careful, and I'm going to make sure we're both safe. Can you trust me on that?" "I trust you," Lily said immediately. "You're the bravest person I know." Nathan had to look away for a moment, blinking against the sudden burn in his eyes. "I love you, kiddo, more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Daddy." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Nathan sat at his laptop and began researching Marcus Webb. Former quality control manager at Carter Industries, retired 5 years ago at age 57, now living in a small town about an hour north of the city. No social media presence, no obvious online footprint beyond basic public records. A man who deliberately made himself hard to find. Nathan found a phone number through a paid search service, hesitated, then decided a direct approach was best. He dialed, expecting voicemail. Marcus Webb answered on the third ring. "Who is this?" "Mr. Webb, my name is Nathan Reed. I'm calling about Carter Industries and the component fraud investigation that Alexandra Carter is conducting. I know you spoke with her before, and I know you declined to get involved. I'm hoping you'll reconsider." There was a long silence. Then, "How did you get this number?" "Public records search. I'm a former Marine and paralegal. I'm helping Alexandra build a case against Victor Reynolds. We need witnesses who can corroborate what happened with the defective components. You're one of the few people who was there, who saw it firsthand, who can make a difference." "I don't want to make a difference," Webb said, his voice hard. "I did my time at that company. I reported what I found. I was ignored, marginalized, and eventually pushed out. I'm done fighting that fight." "I understand," Nathan said. "But people died, Mr. Webb. Marines and soldiers died using equipment that you know was defective. And Victor Reynolds is still there, still in power, still making decisions that put more lives at risk. Is that really okay with you?" Another long silence. When Webb spoke again, his voice was different, older, more tired. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't think about those Marines every damn day? But I can't help you. I signed a non-disclosure agreement when I left. If I talk, I lose my pension, my health insurance. I'm 62 years old with a wife who has multiple sclerosis. I can't afford to lose those benefits." Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. Another obstacle, another way Reynolds had insulated himself. "What if we could protect you? What if we could get federal authorities to give you immunity, to ensure your benefits were protected?" "You can't guarantee that." "No," Nathan admitted. Nathan didn't. "But I can promise you that we're going to pursue this case whether you help us or not. And when it goes public, when the families of those dead Marines find out that people knew about the defective equipment and stayed silent, do you really want to be on that list? Do you want to spend the rest of your life knowing you could have made a difference and chose not to?" The silence stretched so long that Nathan thought Webb had hung up. Then, "Tell me exactly what you need from me." Nathan felt a surge of hope. "Documentation. Anything you kept from your time at Carter Industries that shows Reynolds knew about the component failures. Emails, memos, inspection reports, and eventually We'll need your sworn testimony about what you witnessed, what you reported, how you were silenced. I don't have much, Webb said slowly. I turned over most of my files when I left, but I kept copies of some things, just in case. Personal insurance, you know? Can we meet, face to face? Not at my house, too close to home. There's a library in Millerton, about halfway between us. I can meet you there tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. I'll be there, Nathan said. Thank you, Mr. Webb. You're doing the right thing. I hope so, Webb said. And he sounded genuinely uncertain, because if this goes wrong, if Reynolds comes after me, I'll lose everything. We won't let that happen. You can't promise that either. Webb hung up. Nathan sat holding his phone, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd just convinced a man to risk his livelihood, his wife's health care, everything he'd built. And Nathan had made promises he couldn't guarantee he'd keep. If this went wrong, Marcus Webb wouldn't be the only casualty. His phone buzzed with a text from his cybersecurity contact. Dead Man's Switch is set up, encrypted instructions sent to your email. Stay safe, brother. At least that was one thing secured. If something happened to Nathan or Alexandra, the evidence would still get out. It wasn't much protection, but it was something. Nathan was shutting down his laptop when his phone rang again. Alexandra, her voice tight with controlled panic. Nathan, listen to me very carefully. Don't react. Don't make any sudden moves. Just listen. I'm being followed. Black SUV, 2 men inside. They've been behind me since I left my office. I'm driving toward the police station right now, but I wanted you to know in case... In case what? Nathan was already on his feet, adrenaline spiking. Alexandra, get to the police station. Right now. Don't worry about traffic laws. Just get there. I'm trying, but Nathan, they're trying to cut me off. They're pulling alongside. The sound of tires squealing, Alexandra's sharp intake of breath. Then the phone went dead. Alexandra, Nathan shouted into his phone, but there was no answer. He tried calling back, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. His mind raced through options. Call the police. And tell them what? That a woman he barely knew was maybe in trouble? They'd tell him to have her call them directly, drive to where she was, except he didn't know where she was, and he couldn't leave Lily alone in the apartment. Nathan made a decision. He called 911, reported a woman being followed by suspicious vehicles, gave them Alexandra's name and description, her license plate number that he'd memorized from the cafe parking lot. The dispatcher took the information, said they'd send units to look for her, asked Nathan to stay on the line. He hung up instead and called Mrs. Chen. I need your help, he said when she answered. Emergency. Can you come sit with Lily right now? I have to go help someone. Of course. Of course. I come right now. Mrs. Chen arrived within 3 minutes, and Nathan was already at the door with his keys and his jacket. I don't know when I'll be back. If I'm not back by morning, you take Lily to school and then call this number. He handed her Alexandra's business card. Tell them Nathan said code red. They'll know what to do. Nathan, what is happening? I can't explain. Please, just watch Lily. Don't let anyone in except me. Anyone. Understand? Mrs. Chen nodded, her face grave with worry. I understand. Go. Be careful. Nathan ran to his car, dialed Alexandra's number again as he pulled out of the parking lot. Still no answer. He didn't have her home address, didn't know where she'd been when she called. He drove toward downtown, toward the police station she'd mentioned, scanning every street for signs of an accident, a confrontation, anything. His phone rang. Unknown number. Nathan answered immediately. Alexandra? Mr. Reed. The voice was male, calm, cultured. My name is Victor Reynolds. I believe you've been asking questions about me. Nathan's blood went cold. Where is she? Where's Alexandra? Miss Carter is fine, a bit shaken perhaps, but unharmed. I simply wanted to have a conversation with her about the concerning direction of her investigation. Unfortunately, she was uncooperative. Reynolds' voice was pleasant, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. I'm hoping you'll be more reasonable. Let her go, right now. I will, as soon as we reach an understanding. Nathan could hear the smile in Reynolds' voice. You see, Mr. Reed, you've inserted yourself into a situation you don't fully understand. Ms. Carter has been conducting a misguided investigation based on incomplete information and personal bias. She's making serious accusations that could damage not only my reputation, but the reputation of Carter Industries as a whole. That's not acceptable. What's not acceptable is fraud that kills soldiers, Nathan said, his voice hard. What's not acceptable is covering up defective equipment. What's not acceptable is kidnapping a company executive. Such dramatic language. No one's been kidnapped. Ms. Carter and I are simply having a discussion, and when it's finished, she'll be free to go, with a better understanding of the consequences of continuing her investigation. Reynolds paused. The same offer extends to you. Walk away. Forget about this. Go back to your quiet life with your daughter. No one needs to know about your involvement. No one needs to get hurt. Is that a threat? It's a practical observation. You're a single father, Mr. Reed. Your daughter is 7 years old. She depends on you. Do you really want to risk her well-being by pursuing something that's frankly none of your business? The rage that surged through Nathan was volcanic, but he kept his voice level through sheer force of will. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. You just threatened my daughter. There's no walking away now. There's no deal we can make. I'm going to destroy you, Reynolds. I'm going to expose every crime you've committed, and I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. Reynolds' laugh was soft, genuinely amused. Bold words from a man with no evidence, no authority, and no protection. But I admire your spirit. It's unfortunate we couldn't reach an arrangement. Give my regards to young Lily. Such a sweet child. I hope nothing unfortunate happens to disrupt her happy life. The line went dead. Nathan pulled over, his hands shaking with fury and fear. Reynolds had just made this personal. He'd mentioned Lily by name. He'd made clear that she was vulnerable, that Reynolds knew where she was, that he could reach her if he wanted. This was no longer just about justice for dead Marines or corporate fraud. This was about protecting his daughter from a monster in an expensive suit. Nathan called the police back, reported a kidnapping, gave them every detail he had. Then he called Gerald Whitman's direct line, which went to voicemail. He left a message. This is Nathan Reed. Victor Reynolds just kidnapped Alexandra Carter. He's threatening my daughter. If you're part of this, if you're protecting him, you're complicit in everything that's about to happen. If you're not, call me back immediately. Then Nathan sat in his car on a quiet street and forced himself to think clearly. Panic wouldn't help. Rage wouldn't help. He needed to be smart, strategic, to use everything he'd learned in the Marines about asymmetric warfare and how smaller forces defeated larger ones. Reynolds had resources, connections, corporate power. But Nathan had something Reynolds didn't, a complete lack of regard for his own safety when his daughter was threatened, and the training to be very, very dangerous when motivated. His phone rang. Gerald Whitman. Nathan, I just got your message. What the hell is going on? Your senior VP of operations just kidnapped your VP of internal investigations and threatened my 7-year-old daughter. That's what's going on. Nathan's voice was ice. Question is, are you part of it or not? I'm not part of anything, Whitman said, and he sounded genuinely shocked. Where's Alexandra right now? I don't know. Reynolds called me from an unknown number. He said they were having a discussion and that she'd be released when she agreed to drop her investigation. That son of a... Whitman bit off whatever he was going to say. Okay. I'm calling our head of security, getting them to track Alexandra's phone, her car, anything. And I'm calling the police commissioner directly. If Reynolds has taken this action, he's gone completely rogue. There's no company authority behind this. Can you guarantee my daughter's safety? I'll assign a security detail to your building immediately. Former Secret Service? Best we have. They'll be there within the hour. Whitman's voice was sharp, decisive. Nathan, I need you to understand something. I authorized Alexandra's investigation because I suspected there were problems in Reynolds' division. I did not authorize this. I would never authorize this. Whatever he's doing, he's acting alone. Or with accomplices inside your company. Possibly. Which is why I need you to trust me right now. Let me help you. Let me use company resources to find Alexandra and stop Reynolds before this gets worse. Nathan weighed his options. He didn't trust Whitman completely, but he had no choice. He needed help, needed resources he didn't have. Fine, but if anything happens to Alexandra or to my daughter, I'm holding you personally responsible. Understood. I'll call you back within 30 minutes with an update. Stay where you are. Stay safe. Whitman hung up. Nathan sat in his car watching the street, thinking about Lily asleep in the apartment with Mrs. Chen watching over her, about Marines dying with defective equipment, about Alexandra Carter somewhere being persuaded to drop her investigation, about how quickly a simple act of helping a stranger had spiraled into something that threatened everything he loved. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she were here. She'd tell him to protect Lily above all else. She'd tell him that no cause, no matter how just, was worth risking their daughter's safety. She'd tell him to walk away, to take the deal Reynolds offered, to go back to their quiet life. But Sarah wasn't here, and Nathan knew with bone-deep certainty that walking away wouldn't keep Lily safe. Reynolds had already shown he was willing to threaten children. If Nathan backed down now, it would only confirm that threats worked, that Reynolds could get away with anything as long as he was willing to be ruthless enough. The only way to protect Lily was to eliminate the threat completely, to take Reynolds down so thoroughly that he'd never be able to hurt anyone again. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo loaded slowly on his screen. It was Alexandra, sitting in what looked like an office, her hands bound with zip ties, her face composed but showing strain. The photo was clearly meant as proof of life, and as a demonstration of Reynolds' power. Underneath the photo, "Last chance. Walk away, or things get worse for everyone." Nathan stared at the image, at Alexandra's bound hands, at her defiant expression even in captivity. Then he took a screenshot, forwarded it to Gerald Whitman, to the police detective he'd spoken with, and to his cybersecurity contact with a message. "Dead Man's Switch now includes this photo and all details of Reynolds' threats. If anything happens to me, Alexandra Carter, or my daughter, this goes to every news outlet in the country." He sent one more message, this one directly to the unknown number that had sent the photo. "You made a mistake, Reynolds. You should have left my daughter out of this. Now there's no negotiation, no compromise, no deal. I'm coming for you, and I'm bringing everything you've tried to hide into the light. Every crime, every cover-up, every life you've destroyed. You wanted a war? You got one." Nathan put his phone away and started his car. He had a stop to make before morning, a visit to a storage unit where he'd kept certain items from his time in the Marines, things he'd hoped never to need again, tools for a different kind of fight. The quiet life was over. The war had begun. And Nathan Reed was done playing defense. The storage unit was in a facility on the edge of town, one of those anonymous rows of orange doors under fluorescent lights that hummed too loud in the night silence. Nathan hadn't been here in 3 years, not since he'd packed away the last remnants of his Marine life and tried to pretend that version of himself no longer existed. He punched in the code, Sarah's birthday, because he'd never been able to forget, and the lock clicked open with a finality that felt like crossing a threshold he couldn't uncross. Inside, covered in a thin layer of dust, were the boxes he'd sealed away. Not weapons. He'd turned those in when he left the service. But everything else. His combat uniforms, carefully folded and preserved. His tactical vest, stripped of armor plates but still configured the way he'd worn it in Helmand. His field manuals, his training notebooks, his tablets full of legal precedents and investigation protocols from his time in JAG. And at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in oilcloth, his father's binoculars from Vietnam and a combat knife that had been a gift from his platoon sergeant. Nathan sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit and methodically went through everything, his hands moving with muscle memory that had never quite faded. He wasn't planning to fight Reynolds physically. That would be stupid and illegal and would only prove Reynolds' narrative that Nathan was dangerous. But he needed to remember who he'd been, what he was capable of, the mindset that had kept him alive when others died. His phone rang. Gerald Whitman. "We found her," Whitman said without preamble. "Alexandra's car is at a warehouse complex in the industrial district near the river. Building is owned by one of Reynolds' shell companies. Police are mobilizing now, but they're concerned about hostage safety. They're talking about negotiators, SWAT protocols, all the standard procedures that take time." "How much time?" "At least an hour to get everyone in position. Maybe 2. Whitman paused. "Security detail is at your apartment. 2 men, both former Secret Service. They'll stay there until this is resolved. Your daughter is safe." Nathan felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. Thank you. What about Reynolds? Where is he? We don't know. He's not answering his phone, not at his house, not at his office. He's gone dark. Whitman's voice was tight with controlled anger. Nathan, I've been CEO of this company for 8 years. I've dealt with fraud, with embezzlement, with executives cutting corners for bonuses. But this, kidnapping, threats against children, this is beyond anything I imagined. Whatever you need, whatever resources will help end this, you have them. I need the address of that warehouse, and I need you to tell the police to hold position for 30 minutes. Don't raid, don't make contact, just contain the area. Can you do that? Why 30 minutes? Because I'm going to get Alexandra out before anyone else gets hurt. Nathan was already on his feet, already mentally mapping the route to the industrial district. Reynolds called me. He thinks I'm the weak point, the civilian who will fold under pressure. I'm going to use that. Nathan, you're not trained for hostage rescue. I'm trained for exactly this, Nathan interrupted. 6 years in the Marines, including 2 deployments where we did building clearances and hostage recovery. I know what I'm doing. Just give me the address in 30 minutes. Whitman was silent for a long moment. This could go very wrong. It's already very wrong. I'm just trying to minimize the casualties. Nathan grabbed his field tablet, ready to input coordinates. Address, now. Whitman gave it to him, an old industrial complex near the waterfront, the kind of area that had been thriving in the 70s and slowly dying ever since. Nathan punched it into his phone's GPS. 23 minutes away. I'm texting you a private number, Whitman said. It's our head of security, Marcus Dresden, former Delta Force. He's already on his way to the warehouse location. He'll be your backup if things go sideways. Tell him to stay outside the perimeter. If I'm not out in 30 minutes with Alexandra, then he can come in. But not before. Reynolds is expecting force. He's not expecting negotiation. You're going to negotiate? After he threatened your daughter? I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse, Nathan said, and ended the call. He drove through the empty streets with the kind of focused calm that only came from training and necessity. His mind was already running through scenarios, possibilities, angles of approach. The warehouse would have limited entry points. Reynolds would have at least 2 men with him, the ones from the SUV that had forced Alexandra off the road. Possibly more. They'd be armed, probably with handguns, maybe with something heavier. They'd be watching the main entrance, maybe the loading docks. But they wouldn't be expecting someone to walk in the front door and start talking. Nathan pulled up 2 blocks from the warehouse, parking in the shadows between streetlights. He could see police units staging at the far end of the street, lights off, waiting. He sent a quick text to the number Whitman had given him. Read here. I'm going in through the front. Give me 30 minutes. If you hear shots, come running. Otherwise, stay put. The response came immediately. You're insane. Good luck. Nathan checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. He'd give himself until 12:15 to get Alexandra out. After that, all bets were off. He walked toward the warehouse with his hands visible, his phone in one hand with the screen lit, his posture deliberately non-threatening. The building loomed ahead, 5 stories of brick and broken windows, most of it dark except for lights visible on the 3rd floor. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but the gate hung open, rusted and forgotten. Nathan walked through it and approached the main entrance, a heavy steel door covered in graffiti. He stood directly in front of it, knowing cameras were probably watching, and called the number Reynolds had used earlier. Reynolds answered on the 2nd ring. Mr. Reed, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. Have you reconsidered my offer? I want to talk, face to face. You and me, no weapons, no threats, just a conversation about how we both get what we want. Nathan kept his voice level, reasonable. I'm standing outside your warehouse right now. I'm unarmed. I'm alone. Let me in. And why would I do that? Because you're a smart man, Reynolds. You didn't build your career by being stupid or impulsive. You know that kidnapping a corporate executive is a federal crime. You know the police are probably already looking for Alexandra. You know that holding her much longer increases your exposure exponentially. Nathan paused, letting that sink in. But you also know that if I agree to walk away, if I convince Alexandra to drop her investigation, you might still salvage this situation. So let me in. Let's talk like rational adults. The silence stretched. Nathan could almost hear Reynolds' mind working, weighing risks and benefits, calculating odds. Finally, come to the third floor, take the stairs on the east side of the building. Walk slowly, keep your hands visible. If you're armed, if there's anyone with you, Ms. Carter will pay the price. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Nathan said, and the line went dead. The steel door buzzed and clicked open. Nathan pushed through into darkness that smelled of oil and rust and years of abandonment. His eyes adjusted slowly to the dim emergency lighting that provided just enough illumination to navigate. The east stairwell was exactly where Reynolds said it would be, a concrete shaft with metal stairs that rang hollowly under Nathan's feet as he climbed. Third floor. A hallway lit by temporary work lights strung along the ceiling, leading to a door at the far end. Nathan walked toward it, his heart rate elevated but controlled, adrenaline sharpening his senses. He was aware of every sound, every shadow, every possible ambush point. The door opened before he reached it. A man stepped out. One of the ones from the SUV, Nathan guessed. Thick build, close-cropped hair, the kind of guy who'd done security work long enough to be casual about violence. He held a pistol loosely at his side. "Arms up," the man said. Nathan complied, and the man patted him down efficiently, professionally. "He's clean," the man called back into the room, then gestured with the pistol. "Inside." Nathan walked into what had once been an office suite, now mostly empty except for some folding chairs and temporary lighting. Alexandra sat in one of the chairs, her hands still zip-tied, but otherwise appearing unharmed. Her eyes met Nathan's, and he saw a flash of something, relief, worry, warning. He gave her the smallest nod, then turned his attention to the man standing by the window. Victor Reynolds looked exactly like his photographs. Silver hair, expensive suit despite the late hour, the kind of polished confidence that came from decades of corporate success. He regarded Nathan with curious interest, like a scientist examining an unexpected specimen. "Mr. Reed," Reynolds said, his voice smooth and cultured, "I have to admit, I'm impressed by your courage. Walking in here alone, knowing what you know, that takes a certain recklessness or stupidity. I haven't decided which." "It's called principles," Nathan said. "Something you wouldn't understand. Where are we on the conversation about everyone getting what they want?" Reynolds smiled thinly. "Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. Here's what I want. Ms. Carter drops her investigation immediately, signs a document acknowledging that her allegations were baseless and motivated by personal animus, and returns all materials she's collected to me for destruction. You, Mr. Reed, forget you ever heard the name Victor Reynolds and go back to your quiet life. In exchange, everyone walks away unharmed. No charges filed, no revenge pursued. Clean break. And if we refuse? Then things become significantly more unpleasant, for both of you, and for certain third parties." Reynolds let that hang in the air. "I believe I mentioned your daughter earlier. Lily, yes? Sweet child. It would be unfortunate if her life became complicated by her father's poor choices." Nathan felt the rage surge again but kept it locked down, controlled, useful. "You made a mistake bringing her into this. A big mistake. Because now there's no scenario where you walk away clean. You've committed kidnapping, extortion, and threatening harm to a minor. Those are federal crimes, Reynolds. Even if we agreed to your terms, even if we destroyed every piece of evidence, those crimes still happened, and I'm not the only one who knows about them." "Ah, yes, your dead man's switch," Reynolds waved dismissively. "An interesting precaution, but ultimately meaningless. By the time any information gets released, I'll be in a country with no extradition treaty, living very comfortably on accounts you'll never find. You're not the first person to threaten me, Mr. Reed, and you won't be the last. The difference is, I always win. Always." "You won't this time," Alexandra said, speaking for the first time, her voice hoarse but firm. "I sent copies of everything to the Defense Criminal Investigative Service 3 hours ago. Not through normal channels, directly to the assistant director, someone I know personally from my time at the Pentagon. By now, federal agents are already executing search warrants on your office, your home, all your known properties. This warehouse is probably surrounded. It's over, Victor. The only question now is how much worse you want to make it for yourself." Reynolds' expression shifted, surprise flashing across his features before he controlled it. You're bluffing. You would have told me if you'd gone to DCIS. Why would I tell you anything? Alexandra's smile was cold. I'm not an amateur, Victor. I've been investigating fraud for 15 years. You think I'd conduct a 6-month investigation without eventually bringing in federal authorities? I just had to wait until I had enough evidence that they'd take it seriously. Nathan showing up, the break-in, your kidnapping stunt, that accelerated my timeline. But the wheels were already in motion. Nathan watched Reynolds process this, saw the calculations happening behind those cold eyes. If Alexandra was telling the truth, and Nathan suspected she was, then Reynolds' endgame had just collapsed. No clean exit, no escape to a non-extradition country, no buying his way out of federal charges. Last chance, Nathan said quietly. You let us walk out of here right now, you surrender to the police peacefully, and you cooperate fully with the federal investigation. Do that, and maybe you get a deal. Maybe you serve 10 years instead of 20. Fight this, hurt anyone else, and I personally guarantee you'll spend the rest of your life in a maximum security federal prison. Your choice. Reynolds laughed, but it was a bitter sound, empty of real humor. You think I'm afraid of prison? You think I'm going to just surrender because some former Marine and an overzealous investigator think they've got me cornered? He turned to the security guard. Kill them, both of them. Make it look like they attacked each other. Dispose of the bodies in the river. The security guard raised his pistol, but he was too slow. Nathan had been watching his eyes, his body language, reading the micro-expressions that signaled decision-making. He moved before the gun fully leveled, crossing the distance in 3 quick steps, his hand snapping out to catch the guard's wrist and redirect the weapon's aim. The pistol fired, deafeningly loud in the enclosed space, but the bullet went wide, punching into the ceiling. Nathan drove his elbow into the guard's throat, heard the wet choke as the man's windpipe collapsed, then wrenched the pistol free as the guard dropped to his knees, gasping. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. Nathan spun toward Reynolds, the pistol now aimed at the executive's chest. Don't move. Don't even breathe wrong. Reynolds had frozen, his hands raised slightly, his face showing genuine fear for the first time. You can't shoot me. That's murder. They'll crucify you. Self-defense, Nathan corrected, his voice deadly calm. You ordered your man to kill us. Everyone heard it. There are probably a dozen microphones recording this conversation right now. He raised his voice slightly. Isn't that right, Dresden? A new voice came from the doorway. A man in tactical gear, rifle raised, badge visible on his vest. Former Delta Force, current head of security for Carter Industries, now working with DCIS. You're absolutely right, Mr. Reed. We got everything on tape. Reynolds, you're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and about 15 other charges we'll enumerate when you're processed. More agents poured into the room, moving with the practiced efficiency of federal law enforcement. One of them cut Alexandra's zip ties while another secured Reynolds with handcuffs. The security guard was still on the floor, breathing painfully but alive, receiving medical attention from an agent with an EMT patch. Nathan lowered the pistol carefully, engaged the safety, and handed it grip first to Dresden. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash beginning. Alexandra, are you okay? She was rubbing her wrists where the zip ties had cut into her skin, but she nodded. I'm fine. Terrified, but fine. She looked at Nathan with something like awe. You came for me. You walked into a hostage situation unarmed. I was never unarmed, Nathan said quietly. I just didn't have a weapon. He glanced at Dresden. How long were you monitoring? Since you made the phone call outside. We had parabolic mics aimed at the building, thermal imaging tracking your location. The moment he ordered that guard to shoot, we were coming in anyway. You just gave us better cause by disabling the immediate threat. Dresden's expression was respectful. That was some impressive hand-to-hand work. Where'd you learn to move like that? Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, instructor level. Nathan felt the exhaustion starting to creep in. Is my daughter safe? The detail at my apartment, still in place, still secure. We've got units rolling past your building every 10 minutes. No suspicious activity. Dresden clapped Nathan on the shoulder. You did good tonight, Reed. Most civilians would have folded when Reynolds threatened the kid. You turned it into leverage. He made it personal, Nathan said simply. That was his mistake. They were escorted out of the warehouse into a chaos of flashing lights and federal vehicles. Nathan counted at least a dozen agencies represented: FBI, DCIS, state police, city police, even representatives from the Inspector General's office. The investigation had clearly escalated far beyond what he'd imagined. Gerald Whitman was there, standing by a black sedan, looking older and more tired than he had that afternoon. He walked over as Nathan and Alexandra emerged. "Thank God," Whitman said, and he sounded genuinely relieved. "When Dresden said you'd gone in alone, I thought—" He shook his head. "Never mind. You're both safe. That's what matters." "What happens now?" Alexandra asked. "To the company? To the investigation?" DCIS has full access to everything. Every file, every database, every employee they want to interview. The board has already voted to suspend Reynolds pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. I'm implementing a complete audit of all procurement and quality control processes. Whitman met her eyes. "Your investigation was right, Alexandra. Everything you suspected and more. We found preliminary evidence of fraud going back at least 7 years. Millions in stolen funds, dozens of compromised contracts. It's going to take months to untangle. The Marines who died," Nathan said. "The families who lost people because of defective equipment. What about them? Compensation. Apologies. Whatever justice we can provide." Whitman's voice was heavy. "It won't bring anyone back, but at least the truth will be known, and the people responsible will be held accountable." Nathan nodded slowly. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. A federal agent approached, a woman in her 40s with the kind of professional demeanor that marked senior investigators. "Mr. Reed, I'm Assistant Director Patricia Vance, DCIS. I need to get statements from both you and Ms. Carter. Tonight, if possible, while everything's fresh." "Of course," Nathan said. Then, to Whitman, "Can you make sure the security detail stays at my apartment until I get home? And let them know I'm fine so Lily doesn't wake up to find strangers and think something's wrong?" "Already done. Take your time. Your daughter is completely safe." The statements took 3 hours, going over every detail of the past 2 days. The mall incident, the cafe meeting, the investigation revelations, the threats, the standoff. Nathan recounted it all with the precision of someone trained in legal documentation, leaving nothing out, adding nothing that wasn't strictly factual. It was almost 3 a.m. when he finally got back to his apartment. The security detail, 2 serious men in dark suits, greeted him with professional nods and confirmed that everything had been quiet. Mrs. Chen had left around midnight after Whitman's people arrived, but she'd left a note. "So glad you are safe. Lily sleeps like angel. Come for tea tomorrow. You tell me everything." Nathan checked on Lily, who was indeed sleeping peacefully. Her dolphin book on the nightstand, her stuffed animals arranged around her in their usual protective circle. He stood watching her breathe, feeling the overwhelming wash of relief and love and gratitude that she was safe, that he'd protected her, that the nightmare was finally over. He collapsed on his own bed, still fully clothed, and fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. Morning came with Lily's voice calling from her room. Nathan dragged himself awake, every muscle protesting, his hand still showing the bruises from the fight with the security guard. He pulled on a sweatshirt to hide the worst of it and went to get his daughter ready for school. "Daddy, you look tired," Lily said, studying him with concern. "Did you stay up really late?" "I had some work stuff to take care of," Nathan said, which was technically true. "But everything's fine now, better than fine." "The men outside said you're a hero," Lily said matter-of-factly as Nathan helped her into her jacket. "They said you saved someone. Is that true?" Nathan hesitated, trying to find words that wouldn't frighten her but wouldn't be a lie. "I helped a friend who was in trouble. That's what people do. They help each other when things are hard. Like you helped the lady at the mall." "Exactly like that." Lily considered this as they walked to the car. "I think you're always a hero, Daddy, even when you're just making breakfast or helping with homework. Heroes don't have to do big things. They just have to do the right things." Nathan had to blink back sudden tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned it from you," Lily said simply, and climbed into the car. The security detail followed them to Lily's school at a discreet distance. Nathan walked his daughter to the entrance, kissed her goodbye, and watched her run inside with her backpack bouncing, already calling to Emma about something important that had happened with the dolphins in her book. His phone rang as he got back to his car. Marcus Webb. "I saw the news," Webb said without preamble. "Federal raids on Carter Industries, arrests, an executive facing kidnapping and murder charges." "That was you, wasn't it? You and Alexandra Carter?" "It was a team effort," Nathan said. "But yes, we got him, Mr. Webb. Reynolds is going to prison for a very long time." Webb was quiet for a moment. "I've been sitting here all morning thinking about the Marines who died. The ones I couldn't save because I didn't fight hard enough, because I took the easy way out and walked away with my pension." His voice was thick with emotion. "You didn't walk away. You could have. After that mall thing, you could have just gone back to your life. But you didn't." "I couldn't," Nathan said simply. "Not once I knew what was at stake." "I'm coming forward anyway," Webb said. "I know they've got Reynolds dead to rights now, but I want my testimony on record. I want the families of those Marines to know that people inside the company knew there were problems, that we tried to fix them, that we were silenced, but not everyone stayed silent." He paused. "It won't save my pension. My wife's going to be furious, but it's the right thing to do." "For what it's worth," Nathan said, "I think you're making the right choice. And I think there are probably whistleblower protections that can help you. Let me connect you with Alexandra. She knows the system better than I do." "I'd appreciate that." Webb cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mr. Reed, for finishing what I should have finished years ago." Nathan ended the call and sat in his car in the school parking lot, watching the ordinary morning unfold around him. Parents dropping off kids, teachers arriving with coffee cups and lesson plans, a maintenance worker fixing a broken sprinkler head. Normal life, continuing as it always did, while just beneath the surface ran the currents of justice and consequence and people trying to do the right thing in a world that didn't always make it easy. His phone buzzed with a text from Alexandra. "Thank you for last night, for coming after me, for not giving up. I owe you my life." Nathan typed back, "You don't owe me anything. We're on the same team. How are you doing?" "Sore, shaken, but alive. DCIS wants me to serve as a consultant on the investigation. Might take months to untangle everything, but we're going to find every instance of fraud, every compromised product, every dollar that was stolen. We're going to make this right. Let me know how I can help. Get some rest. Spend time with your daughter. You've done more than enough." Nathan smiled at his phone, then started his car. But instead of going home, he found himself driving toward the cemetery where Sarah was buried. He hadn't been there in months. It was too painful, too raw even after 3 years. But today felt different. Today he felt like he needed to tell her what had happened, to explain the choices he'd made and why. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful in the morning light. Nathan walked to Sarah's grave, a simple headstone with her name and dates, and the phrase they'd chosen together before she died. She loved fiercely and without fear. "Hey," Nathan said softly, sitting on the grass beside the stone. "Sorry it's been a while. Things have been complicated." He told her everything: the mall incident, the investigation, the threats, the standoff at the warehouse. He told her about Lily's wisdom, about how their daughter was growing up brave and kind and wise beyond her years. He told her about the choice he'd made to fight instead of walking away, and how terrified he'd been that it might cost Lily her father the way cancer had cost her a mother. "I keep wondering what you'd say," Nathan said. "Whether you'd be proud or furious or both. I think probably both. You always were good at holding contradictory emotions simultaneously." He smiled at the memory. "But I think you'd understand why I had to do it. Not just for the Marines who died, though that's part of it, but for Lily. I couldn't teach her to stand up for what's right if I didn't do it myself. And I couldn't let her grow up thinking that the bad guys always win, that power always protects power." The morning breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of cut grass and flowers from nearby graves. Nathan sat for a long time in the quiet, feeling closer to Sarah than he had in months. "I miss you," he finally said, "every single day. But I think we're going to be okay, Lily and me. We've got each other. We've got a purpose. We've got people who turned out to be friends when we needed them." He stood, brushed grass from his jeans. "I'll come visit more often. I promise. And I'll keep making you proud. Both of us will." He walked back to his car feeling lighter somehow, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying for too long. The investigation would continue. There would be trials, testimony, endless legal proceedings, but the immediate danger was over. Reynolds was in custody. The truth was coming out, and Lily was safe. That afternoon, Nathan picked Lily up from school and took her to the park. They swung on the swings, climbed on the jungle gym, chased each other around the playground until they were both breathless and laughing. Other parents watched with that particular kind of approval reserved for involved fathers, and Nathan felt a quiet pride that he'd managed to protect this, the ordinary joy of a father and daughter on a beautiful autumn day. "Daddy," Lily said as they sat on a bench eating ice cream from the truck that came every afternoon, "the news said there was a big arrest last night. Bad people who were hurting soldiers." Nathan had known this conversation was coming. "That's right. Were you involved in that?" "I was, a little bit." Nathan chose his words carefully. "Remember the lady from the mall, Alexandra? She was investigating some people who were doing bad things, and those people got angry at her and tried to hurt her, so I helped make sure she stayed safe." Lily processed this, her 7-year-old mind working through the implications. "Did you stop the bad people?" "I helped. A lot of other people helped too, police officers, federal agents, good people inside the company. We all worked together." "I'm glad," Lily said simply. "The soldiers should have good equipment that works. It's not fair if they don't." "No," Nathan agreed. "It's not fair at all. But now it's going to get better. The people who did the bad things are going to be punished, and the company is going to fix what was broken." Lily nodded, satisfied with this explanation, and went back to her ice cream. Nathan watched her, this small person who somehow understood justice and fairness with a clarity that adults often lost. She was going to be okay, he thought. They were both going to be okay. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Nathan sat on his couch with his laptop and finally allowed himself to look at the news coverage. It was everywhere. Front page of every major newspaper, lead story on every news site, trending on every social media platform. Massive fraud ring exposed at major defense contractor. Executive arrested in kidnapping, murder plot. Whistleblower investigation reveals years of military equipment fraud. And there, embedded in most of the stories, was the video from the mall. The moment that had started everything, Nathan asking his question, Alexandra revealing her identity, the security guards backing down. The clip that had gone from viral sensation to historical record, the incident that had set everything else in motion. 43 million views now. Comments in the hundreds of thousands. Nathan scrolled through a few of them, reading the reactions of strangers who had no idea how that moment had escalated, what it had led to, how close it had come to ending in tragedy. His phone buzzed. Gerald Whitman. "Nathan, I wanted to call personally to thank you. The board met this afternoon, and we've decided to offer you a permanent position as Director of Ethics and Compliance. Significant salary, full benefits, flexible schedule to accommodate Lily. We need people like you, people who won't compromise, who will stand up even when it's dangerous." Whitman paused. "Take some time to think about it. No pressure. But the offer stands for as long as you need." Nathan thanked him, promised to consider it, and ended the call. It was a good offer, possibly a great one. It would mean financial security, meaningful work, a chance to actually make a difference in how defense contractors operated. But it would also mean going back into that world, being constantly immersed in the kind of fraud and corruption and moral compromise that had driven him out the first time. He'd think about it, discuss it with Lily, in age-appropriate terms. Talk it through with Alexandra, get her perspective. But for tonight, he was just going to sit in his quiet apartment and appreciate the fact that everyone he loved was safe, that justice was being served, and that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, doing the right thing actually worked. His phone buzzed one more time. Alexandra sending a photo. It was a picture of her at home, bruised and exhausted but smiling, holding a glass of wine and giving the camera a thumbs up. The caption read, "To asking the right questions at the right time. Thank you for being the person who did." But Nathan smiled and sent back, "To people who stand their ground even when surrounded. Couldn't have done it without you." He set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. The worn furniture, the photos of Sarah, Lily's artwork on the refrigerator, all the ordinary evidence of their ordinary life. A life that had been anything but ordinary for the past few days. A life that had been threatened and defended and ultimately preserved. Outside, the security detail's car was still parked on the street, keeping watch. By tomorrow or the next day, they'd be gone. Their protection no longer necessary. The immediate danger had passed. But Nathan knew he'd never be quite the same person he'd been before he asked that question in the mall. He'd stepped back into the fight he'd walked away from 6 years ago, and this time he'd seen it through to the end. Reynolds was facing decades in federal prison. The fraud ring was being dismantled. The families of fallen soldiers would get answers, compensation, apologies. The system would be reformed. And Nathan Reed, single father and former Marine, had been part of making it happen. It wasn't the quiet life he'd planned. It wasn't the safe, ordinary existence he'd tried to build for himself and Lily. But maybe that life had never been possible anyway. Maybe some people were built to fight, to stand up, to refuse to look away when injustice was right in front of them. Maybe the question wasn't whether to fight, but what to fight for. And Nathan had his answer. For truth, for justice. For the people who couldn't fight for themselves. For the Marines who died using defective equipment. For the soldiers who'd come home with wounds that could have been prevented. For his daughter, who needed to grow up in a world where doing the right thing mattered. For all of them, he'd asked one simple question that changed everything. Do you consent? The world had answered no. And together, they'd made that answer mean something. Nathan woke the next morning to find his phone flooded with messages. The story had exploded overnight in ways he hadn't anticipated. Major news networks were calling it the biggest defense contractor scandal in a decade. Congressional committees were announcing investigations. Veterans organizations were demanding accountability. And at the center of it all, somehow, was the video from the mall, a moment of ordinary courage that had become the symbol for everything that followed. He made coffee and checked on Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully, her dolphin book clutched against her chest, even in dreams. The security detail's car was still outside, a black sedan with tinted windows that looked conspicuously out of place in their modest neighborhood. Nathan appreciated their presence, but also felt the weight of it, the reminder that his life had fundamentally changed, that he'd crossed a line from civilian obscurity into something more complicated and dangerous. His phone rang. Alexandra, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. Nathan, you need to see this. DCIS executed search warrants at 3 more locations this morning. Reynolds' lake house, his office at a consulting firm he owns, and a storage facility registered to one of his shell companies. They found everything. Hard drives with deleted files that weren't actually deleted, paper records going back 15 years, offshore account information, communications with other executives. She paused to catch her breath. This isn't just about the component fraud anymore. This is systematic corruption involving multiple people at Carter Industries and at least 2 other defense contractors. We're talking hundreds of millions in fraudulent billings, kickback schemes, falsified test results across dozens of product lines. Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. How many lives potentially affected? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Equipment that went to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, training facilities, stateside. Radio systems, protective gear, vehicle components, weapons accessories. If it could be manufactured cheaply and billed as premium quality, Reynolds and his network touched it. Alexandra's voice dropped. The preliminary casualty analysis is devastating, Nathan. We're looking at potentially hundreds of deaths that can be directly linked to equipment failures from compromised components. Jesus, Nathan breathed. He thought about the Marines he'd served with, the soldiers he'd worked alongside in JAG, all the people who'd trusted that the equipment they used would work when their lives depended on it. What happens now? DCIS is expanding the investigation to include the FBI's Public Corruption Unit and the Department of Justice. They're talking about RICO charges, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. That's what you use against organized crime syndicates. And they want both of us to testify before a federal grand jury, probably within the next 2 weeks. Nathan rubbed his eyes, feeling the exhaustion from the previous night settling into his bones. I need to make arrangements for Lily. Find someone to watch her while I'm dealing with all this legal stuff. Gerald Whitman mentioned that the company is prepared to provide support services, childcare, security, legal representation if you need it. He's trying to make amends, I think. He feels responsible for not catching Reynolds sooner. Alexandra hesitated. Nathan, there's something else. The families of the fallen Marines from the body armor case, the one you worked on 6 years ago, they've started reaching out to DCIS. They want to reopen that investigation. They want to know if you'll help them. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the case that had driven him from the Marines, the one that had haunted him for 6 years. That case was settled. Sealed records, non-disclosure agreements, financial compensation. Reopening it would be complicated. But not impossible. Not if you're willing to break your NDA and face the consequences. The statute of limitations on fraud hasn't expired. If there was criminal wrongdoing that was covered up, if people died because of it, justice might still be possible. Alexandra's voice was gentle. I know it's asking a lot. You've already done so much, but these families have been waiting 6 years for answers. For someone to acknowledge that their sons and daughters died because of corporate greed, not battlefield circumstances. I signed that NDA under duress, Nathan said slowly. I was told if I didn't sign it and resign quietly, I'd face court-martial on manufactured charges. That's coercion. It might be enough to void the agreement. That's what the DCIS lawyers think too. They're prepared to fight any legal action if Carter Industries or the other company tries to come after you for breach of contract. Alexandra paused. But Nathan, this could get ugly. Reopening a 6-year-old case, challenging powerful people who thought they'd gotten away with it, exposing corruption that goes all the way up the chain of command, you'd be making enemies in places that can make your life very difficult. Nathan thought about Lily sleeping in the next room, about the quiet life he'd tried to build, about all the reasons to say no and walk away. Then he thought about the Marines who'd died wearing defective armor, about their families who'd been told it was just bad luck or battlefield chaos, about the truth that had been buried under legal settlements and corporate protection. Set up the meeting with DCIS, Nathan said. I'll tell them everything I know. I'll turn over every document I kept, every email I saved. I'll testify against anyone who needs to be held accountable, no matter who they are or what position they hold. He could hear Alexandra's smile through the phone. I was hoping you'd say that. The meeting's tomorrow morning at 10, Federal Building downtown. And Nathan, thank you for being someone who doesn't quit when it gets hard. After they hung up, Nathan sat with his coffee and watched the sun rise over the buildings across the street. The security detail changed shifts. New car, different agents, same watchful presence. His phone continued to buzz with notifications, but he ignored most of them. There were interview requests from major news networks, calls from documentarians wanting to tell his story, messages from people claiming to have information about other defense contractor fraud. It was overwhelming, the sudden visibility, the way his private act of conscience had become public spectacle. A soft sound made him turn. Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her hair wild from sleep. Morning, sweetheart, Nathan said, opening his arms. She climbed into his lap, warm and heavy with the particular weight of a child just waking up. Are those men still outside? Lily asked, peering toward the window. They are. They're making sure we're safe. Safe from what? Nathan chose his words carefully. Remember how I told you I helped stop some people who were doing bad things? Well, sometimes when you stop bad people, they get angry. These men are here to make sure the bad people stay away from us. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to important matters. Will they be here forever? No, honey. Just for a little while until everything settles down. Then it'll just be you and me again, like always. I liked it better when it was just you and me, Lily said quietly. The men are nice, but they make everything feel scary. I know, Nathan said, hugging her tighter. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to make things go back to normal as quickly as possible. They made breakfast together, pancakes, because it was Saturday, and Saturday meant pancakes. Lily helped measure flour and crack eggs, chattering about her plans for the weekend, about the chapter she was reading in her dolphin book, about how Emma had invited her to a birthday party next month. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary concerns that had nothing to do with federal investigations or corporate fraud or the dangerous world Nathan had pulled them into. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Nathan checked the peephole, one of the security agents holding a large manila envelope. He opened the door cautiously. Mr. Reed, this was just delivered by courier. Required your signature. The agent handed him a tablet for electronic signing, then passed over the envelope. Also, we've received word that there's increased media presence in the area. Reporters have started showing up, trying to get comments from neighbors. We've asked them to move to public sidewalks, but you should be aware that leaving the building might mean dealing with cameras. Understood, Nathan said, taking the envelope. Thank you. He closed the door and examined the envelope. It was from a law firm in Washington, D.C., Brennan, Chase and Associates. Inside was a letter on expensive letterhead. Dear Mr. Reed, we represent several families of service members who were killed or injured while wearing body armor manufactured by Kellerman Defense Systems between 2016 and 2018. We understand you were the Marine Corps legal advisor who initially investigated the defective armor case and recommended criminal prosecution. We are writing to request your assistance in reopening this matter and pursuing both civil and criminal remedies against all responsible parties. We believe your testimony and the evidence you gathered would be instrumental in achieving justice for our clients. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to discuss how we might proceed. The families we represent are prepared to support you in every way possible, including legal defense if you face any retaliation for breaking your non-disclosure agreement. The letter went on for 2 more pages, outlining the legal strategy, the families involved, the potential charges that could be filed. Nathan read it twice, his hand shaking slightly by the time he finished. This wasn't just about Reynolds anymore. This wasn't just about Carter Industries. This was about going to war with an entire system of corruption that had protected powerful people for decades. His phone rang again. Marcus Webb. Nathan, I hope you don't mind me calling. Alexandra gave me your number. Webb's voice sounded steadier than their previous conversations, more determined. I've been thinking about what you said about finishing what should have been finished years ago. I want to help, however I can. I spent 15 years at Carter Industries, and I saw things, Nathan. Things I documented and reported and was told to forget about. I've got boxes of records in my basement, performance reports, quality control failures, communications between executives about cutting corners. I kept it all, even though my NDA said I should have destroyed it. Why did you keep it? Nathan asked. Insurance at first, then evidence, once I realized how bad things really were. Then just guilt, I guess. Knowing that people were dying and I had proof of why, but I wasn't brave enough to come forward. Webb's voice cracked slightly. My wife has been angry with me ever since I told her I was going to testify. She's terrified we'll lose everything. But this morning, she said something that changed my mind. She said, I didn't marry a coward, Marcus. I married a man with principles. If we lose the house, we'll get another house. But if you don't do this, if you stay silent when you could speak up, I don't know if I'll respect you anymore. Nathan felt a surge of respect for this woman he'd never met. Your wife sounds like a remarkable person. She is. Smarter than me, braver than me, better than I deserve. Webb cleared his throat. So I'm offering you everything I have. Every document, every email I saved, every piece of evidence that might help. And I'll testify anywhere, anytime about anything I witnessed. No more hiding, no more protecting people who don't deserve protection. Mr. Webb, thank you. That takes real courage. No, Webb said quietly. Courage is what you did, walking into that warehouse alone. Courage is what Alexandra did, investigating Reynolds for months while he tried to destroy her. What I'm doing is just finally doing the minimum that any decent person should do. But I'm doing it, and that's something. They arranged to meet the next day before the DCIS meeting, so Webb could turn over his documents and Nathan could review them for anything relevant. After they hung up, Nathan sat for a moment feeling the weight of responsibility settling even heavier on his shoulders. People were looking to him for leadership, for courage, for answers. He wasn't sure he had any of those things. He was just a single dad who'd asked a question in a mall and somehow ended up at the center of a federal investigation. The afternoon passed in a strange haze of normalcy disrupted by chaos. Nathan and Lily watched movies together, played board games, read chapters from the Dolphin book. But every hour or so, his phone would ring with another call related to the investigation. DCIS asking for clarification on details, Alexandra coordinating logistics. Gerald Whitman requesting a meeting to discuss the company's cooperation with authorities. The two realities existed simultaneously, overlapping but separate, and Nathan found himself constantly code-switching between devoted father and whistleblower witness. Evening came. After Lily was asleep, Nathan sat at his laptop and began writing down everything he remembered from the body armor case 6 years ago. Names, dates, conversations, the evidence he'd collected, the pressure he'd faced to drop the investigation, the threats that had been made if he didn't resign quietly. It all came flooding back with painful clarity. The anger he'd felt at being forced to choose between his career and his integrity, the shame of having walked away when he should have fought, the guilt that had haunted him ever since. But maybe, Nathan thought as he typed, maybe he'd been given a second chance. Maybe the universe was offering him an opportunity to finish what he'd started, to finally see justice done for the people who died because he hadn't fought hard enough the first time. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. The message was simple. You're making powerful people very nervous. Be careful. Nathan stared at the screen, trying to decide if this was a warning from a concerned party or a threat from Reynolds' allies. He forwarded it to the DCIS agent he'd been coordinating with, then added the number to his blocked list. There would be more messages like this, he knew. More attempts at intimidation, more subtle threats designed to make him back down. They wouldn't work. Nathan had spent 6 years regretting his decision to walk away from a fight that mattered. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. The next morning, Nathan drove to meet Marcus Webb at a coffee shop across town, the security detail following at a discreet distance. Webb was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 large boxes on the seat beside him. He looked older than his 62 years, worn down by years of carrying secrets and guilt. "Mr. Reed," Webb said, standing to shake Nathan's hand. His grip was firm, despite the tremor Nathan could feel. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for trusting me with this," Nathan replied, sliding into the booth. "What do you have?" Webb opened the first box, revealing stacks of documents organized in labeled folders. "This is everything from my time in quality control at Carter Industries. Performance reports showing failure rates that exceeded acceptable parameters. Communications between me and my supervisors about components that should have been flagged for review but were approved anyway. Emails from Reynolds and other executives discussing ways to reduce costs even if it meant relaxing quality standards." He pulled out a folder marked Radio Components 2019 to 2022 and handed it to Nathan. "This is the smoking gun for the current case. I documented every instance where returned components were sent to that Apex Technical Solutions subsidiary instead of being destroyed or returned to manufacturers. I tracked serial numbers, compared them to purchase orders for new components, and found matches in over 60% of cases." Nathan flipped through the documents, his trained legal eye immediately recognizing their significance. This wasn't circumstantial evidence or suspicious patterns. This was direct proof of systematic fraud. Serial numbers that showed up first as warranty returns, then months later as new purchases. Quality control reports that had been altered between the original submission and the final version that went into official records. Email chains discussing the financial benefits of recycling components rather than properly disposing of them. "This is incredible," Nathan said. "This proves everything Alexandra suspected, and more. Why didn't you come forward with this years ago?" Webb's expression was pained. Fear, cowardice, rationalization. I told myself that I'd tried to fix things through proper channels, that it wasn't my responsibility once I'd reported it to my superiors. I told myself that my pension was more important than abstract notions of justice, that my wife's healthcare needs justified staying silent. He met Nathan's eyes. "I was wrong. About all of it. Those weren't reasons, they were excuses. And they let me sleep at night while people died using equipment I knew was defective." "You're coming forward now," Nathan said. "That takes courage." "It takes necessity," Webb corrected. "I can't live with myself anymore if I don't do this. My wife made me see that." He opened the second box. "This is older material from the body armor case you worked on. I wasn't directly involved, but I heard things, saw documents that crossed my desk, had conversations with people who were involved. I documented what I could because even then, I suspected there was a cover-up happening." Nathan's pulse quickened as he examined the second box. There were internal memos discussing test results that showed the armor plates cracking under standard load conditions. Communications between Kellerman Defense Systems and Carter Industries about ways to obscure the connection between the companies during the investigation. Financial records showing payments that looked suspiciously like hush money to testing facility employees. "This is gold," Nathan breathed. "This could reopen the entire case, void the settlement agreements, put people in prison who thought they'd gotten away clean." "That's what I'm hoping," Webb said. "I've lived with the guilt of that case for years, knowing that Marines died and I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my job. Well, I'm retired now. They can't fire me, and they can't threaten my pension without facing federal whistleblower protection laws. So I'm done being afraid." They spent the next hour going through the documents, with Nathan asking questions and Webb providing context and background. By the time they finished, Nathan had a much clearer picture of the scope of corruption they were dealing with. Not just individual executives making bad decisions, but systematic fraud built into the corporate culture, protected by layers of plausible deniability and strategic document destruction. "I need to get this to DCIS before the meeting this morning," Nathan said, checking his watch. "Can I take these boxes?" "They're yours," Webb said. "I have copies of everything at home, in a safe deposit box and uploaded to an encrypted cloud server. I learned from watching you and Alexandra. Always have backups, always have insurance." They parted with a handshake that felt like something more. A bond between two men who'd decided that doing the right thing mattered more than protecting themselves. Nathan loaded the boxes into his car, called the DCIS agent to let them know he was bringing significant new evidence, and drove toward downtown with a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for 6 years. The federal building was an imposing structure of steel and glass designed to project authority and permanence. Nathan had to pass through multiple security checkpoints, each one requiring verification and explanation. The security detail couldn't follow him inside, so for the first time in days, he was alone in a way that felt both liberating and vulnerable. The DCIS offices were on the 8th floor. Nathan was escorted to a conference room where Alexandra was already waiting, along with 3 people he didn't recognize, 2 men in suits and a woman with the kind of sharp, intelligent expression that marked senior prosecutors. "Nathan Reed," one of the men said, standing to shake his hand. "I'm Special Agent Tom Morrison, DCIS. This is Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Chen and Special Agent David Park from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Thank you for coming in." "Thank you for pursuing this," Nathan replied. He set the boxes on the conference table. "I brought additional evidence, courtesy of Marcus Webb. He's prepared to testify about everything he witnessed during his 15 years at Carter Industries." Jennifer Chen's eyes lit up as she opened the first box and began examining the contents. "This is exactly what we need. Direct documentation of the fraud, communication showing intent, financial records linking the shell companies. Mr. Reed, this changes everything. With this evidence and Mr. Webb's testimony, we're looking at RICO charges against not just Victor Reynolds, but potentially a dozen other executives and employees." They spent the next 4 hours going through Nathan's testimony, recorded and transcribed by a court reporter. He recounted everything from the mall incident to the warehouse confrontation, providing context and detail that would be essential for prosecution. Then they moved to the body armor case, and Nathan found himself reliving the worst period of his Marine Corps service, the investigation that had revealed systematic fraud, the pressure to drop it, the threats and intimidation, the forced choice between his career and his principles. "You say you were threatened with court-martial if you didn't sign the NDA and resign," Jennifer Chen said, making notes. "Can you provide specifics about who made these threats and what exactly was said?" Nathan named names, a colonel who'd called him into his office and explained very clearly that Nathan's career was over if he pushed the investigation further, a civilian lawyer from Kellerman Defense Systems who'd suggested that accidents could happen to Marines who made powerful people angry, a Pentagon procurement officer who told Nathan that some battles weren't worth fighting and that smart people knew when to retreat. "Those are serious allegations," Special Agent Morrison said. "You're claiming that multiple military officers and civilian officials conspired to obstruct a criminal investigation and threaten a whistleblower." "I'm not claiming it," Nathan said quietly. "I'm stating it as fact. It happened. I documented as much as I could at the time, saved emails and recordings where possible. I've lived with the knowledge of what happened for 6 years, wondering if I should have fought harder, if Marines are dead because I didn't push back strong enough. Well, I'm pushing back now. Whatever consequences come from that, I'll accept them. Jennifer Chen and the two agents exchanged looks that Nathan couldn't quite read. Finally, Chen spoke. Mr. Reed, what you're describing is a conspiracy that goes very high up in both military command and defense contractor circles. Pursuing this will make you a target. There will be attempts to discredit you, to attack your credibility, possibly to threaten you or your family again. The people you're accusing have enormous resources and connections. Are you prepared for how ugly this could get? Nathan thought about Lily, about the security detail outside their building, about Sarah's photograph on his wall, and the promise he'd made at her grave to keep making her proud. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to see justice done. For the Marines who died in the original case, for the soldiers who've died since because of Reynolds' fraud, for everyone who's ever been told that some battles aren't worth fighting. I'm fighting this battle, whatever it costs. Then we're with you, Chen said firmly, all the way to trial and beyond. We're going to build cases that are so airtight, so thoroughly documented, that even the best defense attorneys in the country won't be able to create reasonable doubt. And we're going to make sure you and your daughter are protected throughout the process. Alexandra reached across the table and squeezed Nathan's hand. We're in this together, she said simply. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, covering details and logistics and legal strategy. By the time Nathan left the federal building, it was mid-afternoon and he was exhausted in a way that went bone deep. The security detail was waiting in the parking garage, ready to follow him home, but Nathan made a detour first. He drove to Lily's school and arrived just as dismissal began. She came running out with her backpack bouncing, her face lighting up when she saw him waiting at the usual spot. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms. "You're here! I thought maybe the security men were going to pick me up again." "No, sweetheart. I wanted to get you myself." Nathan held her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in this moment of simple fatherhood after hours of discussing fraud and corruption and federal prosecutions. "How was school?" "Good. We had art class, and I made a painting of dolphins jumping out of the ocean, and Mrs. Peterson said it was beautiful, and she's going to hang it in the hallway." Lily's words tumbled over each other in her excitement. "And Emma said her birthday party is going to have a bounce house and a magician, and can I please go, Daddy? Please?" "Of course you can go," Nathan said, buckling her into her car seat. "When is it?" 3 weeks from Saturday. Emma's mom is going to send you an invitation with all the information." Lily kicked her feet happily. "Can we get ice cream?" Nathan smiled. "Sure, we can get ice cream." They went to their usual place, the small shop 3 blocks from their apartment that made everything fresh daily. Lily got her traditional chocolate in a cone. Nathan got vanilla in a cup, and they sat at the outdoor table where they could watch people walk by and dogs strain at their leashes and life continuing in all its ordinary beauty. "Daddy," Lily said around a mouthful of ice cream, "are the bad people all gone now?" Nathan considered how to answer that honestly without frightening her. "Most of them are caught and will be punished. There might be others we don't know about yet, but we're safe. The security men are making sure of that." "Good." Lily took another lick of her ice cream. "I don't like being worried all the time. I want things to be normal again." "Me too, honey. Me too." That night, after Lily was asleep, Nathan sat on his couch and allowed himself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. In less than a week, his life had transformed from quiet obscurity to the center of a federal investigation that was about to expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of military procurement and defense contractor operations. He'd gone from being a single dad, struggling to make ends meet, to being someone whose testimony could send dozens of powerful people to prison. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. And yet Nathan felt more alive than he had in years, more purposeful. More like he was actually making a difference instead of just surviving day to day. His phone buzzed with the text from Alexandra. "Reynolds' arraignment tomorrow at 2 p.m. All major news networks will be covering it. You should probably prepare yourself for increased media attention." Nathan replied, "Can't wait. How are you holding up?" "Sore, exhausted, probably mildly traumatized, but alive and fighting. That's what matters. That's what matters, Nathan agreed. He stayed up late into the night, going through documents, preparing notes for future testimony, making sure every detail was accurate and could withstand cross-examination. The lawyers had warned him that defense attorneys would try to paint him as someone with a grudge against the military, someone whose testimony was motivated by resentment rather than truth. Nathan needed to be unimpeachable, his facts so precisely documented that there was no room for doubt. Around 2 a.m, his phone rang with an unknown number. Nathan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Nathan Reed? The voice was older, male, with the particular gravelly quality that came from years of smoking or shouting, or both. Who is this? My name is Colonel James Patterson, retired. I was your commanding officer's commanding officer back when you were investigating the body armor case. I'm calling to tell you that what you're doing takes guts, and I should have backed you up back then instead of letting them push you out. Nathan sat up straighter, suddenly very alert. Why are you calling me at 2 a.m, Colonel? Because I've spent 6 years feeling like a coward for not supporting you when it mattered. Because I knew the body armor was defective, and I let political pressure override my duty to protect Marines. Because I heard you're reopening the case and I want to help. Patterson's voice was rough with emotion. I've got documentation too, Reed. Orders I received to shut down your investigation, communications from Pentagon procurement. You'll have officers threatening to tank my career if I didn't fall in line. Names of other officers who were pressured to cover up the fraud. I kept it all thinking maybe someday I'd have the courage to use it. Looks like that day is now. Nathan felt something tighten in his chest. Hope mixed with vindication, mixed with renewed determination. Colonel, if you're serious about this, I need you to contact the DCIS agents I'm working with. They'll need to interview you, get your testimony on record, examine your evidence. Already planned on it. I've got a meeting scheduled with them next week. I just wanted to call you first, to tell you that what you did 6 years ago, refusing to drop the investigation even when it cost you your career, that meant something. It meant something to the other Marines who knew what you were fighting for, even if we were too chicken shit to stand with you. It didn't feel like it meant much when I was forced to resign, Nathan said honestly. No, I imagine it didn't. But it planted seeds, Reed, seeds that are finally bearing fruit. You showed us what integrity looked like, even if we weren't ready to follow your example back then. Some of us are ready now. They talked for another 30 minutes, Patterson providing details about the pressure campaign that had been orchestrated to shut down Nathan's investigation, naming names and describing specific incidents that Nathan had only partially understood at the time. By the time they hung up, Nathan had 3 pages of new notes and a growing sense that this case was bigger than even he'd imagined. The arraignment the next day was a media circus. Nathan didn't attend. He'd been advised that his presence might be disruptive, but he watched it live on his laptop while Lily was at school. Victor Reynolds stood before the judge in an expensive suit, flanked by 3 high-powered attorneys, his expression carefully neutral as the charges were read. Conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of government documents, trafficking in counterfeit goods, conspiracy to obstruct justice, kidnapping, attempted murder. The list went on, each charge carrying years of potential prison time. Reynolds pleaded not guilty to all charges. His attorney made a statement to the press outside the courthouse, claiming his client was being scapegoated for systematic problems in the defense procurement process, that he was innocent of any wrongdoing, that the government was overreaching in its prosecution. Nathan watched it all with a sense of grim satisfaction. He'd seen this playbook before. Powerful people accused of crimes they definitely committed, hiding behind expensive lawyers and PR firms, trying to create enough doubt and delay that the truth got lost in legal maneuvering. But this time would be different. This time there was too much evidence, too many witnesses, too much public attention for the case to be quietly settled or dismissed. This time, justice might actually be served. His phone rang. The law firm from Washington, D.C. Mr. Reed, we wanted to inform you that we've filed a motion to reopen the Kellerman Defense Systems case. With the new evidence you've provided and the testimony of Colonel Patterson and Marcus Webb, we believe we have sufficient grounds to void the original settlement and pursue both criminal and civil remedies. The attorney's voice was professionally excited. The families we represent are extremely grateful for your courage in coming forward. They want you to know that whatever legal challenges you face, whatever retaliation attempts occur, they will stand with you and provide whatever support is needed. Tell them thank you, Nathan said, and tell them I'm sorry it took me 6 years to find the courage to finish what I started. You're finishing it now, the attorney replied. That's what matters. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of interviews, depositions, document reviews, and coordination with federal prosecutors. Nathan found himself at the center of multiple investigations, his testimony and evidence forming the foundation for cases that would take years to fully prosecute. Marcus Webb turned over his boxes of documents and gave testimony that corroborated everything Nathan and Alexandra had reported. Colonel Patterson provided the military perspective and named other officers who'd been part of the cover-up. Other whistleblowers began coming forward, emboldened by the public attention and the federal protection being offered. The house of cards that Victor Reynolds had built over 20 years was collapsing, and it was taking down dozens of other corrupt actors with it. But the cost was high. Nathan's face was everywhere now. News broadcasts, magazine covers, online articles analyzing his background and motivations. The video from the mall had been watched over 100 million times, turned into a cultural touchstone, endlessly dissected and discussed. Privacy was gone. Anonymity was gone. The quiet life was thoroughly, irreversibly gone. Through it all, Nathan tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Lily. School, homework, reading time, weekend activities. The security detail eventually scaled back to periodic check-ins rather than constant surveillance. Life began to find a new rhythm, different from before, but gradually becoming familiar. 3 weeks after the arraignment, on a Saturday afternoon, Nathan sat in the park watching Lily play on the jungle gym. The sun was warm, the air smelled of cut grass and late autumn flowers, and for a moment everything felt almost peaceful. His phone buzzed. Gerald Whitman. Nathan, I wanted you to hear this from me directly before it goes public tomorrow. The board has voted to implement comprehensive reforms across Carter Industries. Complete overhaul of quality control procedures, independent oversight of procurement processes, mandatory ethics training for all employees, and a victim compensation fund for families affected by the fraud. We're also partnering with the Department of Defense to create new industry-wide standards for component testing and documentation. Whitman paused. None of this would have happened without you. You forced us to confront problems we'd been ignoring, to acknowledge that profit can never come at the cost of soldiers' lives. Thank you. I didn't do it for thanks, Nathan said. I did it because it needed to be done. I know. That's why it mattered. Whitman cleared his throat. The offer still stands, Nathan, Director of Ethics and Compliance, whenever you're ready. But I understand if you'd rather not be associated with Carter Industries given everything that's happened. Nathan watched Lily climb to the top of the jungle gym, fearless and laughing. Let me think about it. Right now, I just want to focus on being a dad. Understandable. The offer doesn't expire. Take all the time you need. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Nathan called Lily down from the jungle gym. They walked home together, her small hand in his, talking about nothing and everything. School, friends, dolphins, what they should have for dinner. Normal things. Beautiful, ordinary things. The kind of things worth fighting for. 6 months passed like water through fingers, each day bringing new developments in what the media had started calling the Carter Industries scandal. Nathan found himself living in a strange duality. Mornings spent making breakfast and walking Lily to school, afternoons consumed by depositions and meetings with prosecutors, evenings devoted to homework help and bedtime stories. The contrast was jarring, moving between the innocence of his daughter's world and the dark complexity of corporate corruption and criminal prosecution. The federal cases moved forward with the slow, grinding inevitability of bureaucratic justice. Victor Reynolds remained in custody, his bail denied after prosecutors argued he was a flight risk with the means to disappear. 3 other Carter Industries executives had been indicted. 2 had taken plea deals in exchange for testimony against Reynolds and higher-level conspirators. The investigation had expanded to include Pentagon procurement officers, testing facility employees and executives from 4 other defense contractors who'd participated in similar fraud schemes. Nathan testified before a federal grand jury twice, his words recorded and transcribed, his evidence examined by teams of lawyers looking for any weakness that defense attorneys might exploit. He was questioned for hours about his motivations, his documentation methods, his memory of events from 6 years ago. The prosecutors prepared him well, running mock cross-examinations that were more brutal than anything the actual defense could throw at him. "They're going to try to paint you as someone with an axe to grind," Jennifer Chen told him during one preparation session. "Someone who was bitter about being forced out of the Marines, who manufactured this entire scandal as revenge. You need to stay calm, stick to the facts, and never let them provoke you into emotional responses that could be used to discredit your testimony." Nathan understood. He'd learned emotional control in the Marines, refined it through 6 years of single parenthood. He could handle whatever the defense attorneys threw at him. What was harder to handle was the impact on Lily. She'd become something of a celebrity at school, the daughter of the man from the viral video, the kid whose dad was helping to expose corporate fraud. Most of the attention was positive, but not all of it. Some parents had complained that Nathan was dragging a child into adult matters, that his actions had made their school a target for media attention. The principal had called him in for a meeting to discuss maintaining appropriate boundaries between Mr. Reed's public activities and the school environment. Nathan had listened politely, then explained very clearly that his daughter's education and well-being were his top priorities, but he wouldn't apologize for pursuing justice. If the school had concerns about media presence, he'd be happy to work with them on security protocols. But he wouldn't be silent about corruption because it made some people uncomfortable. The principal had backed down, and the complaints had mostly faded. But Nathan knew there would always be people who preferred comfort to truth, who resented anyone who disrupted the status quo, even when that status quo was built on lies. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, Nathan received a call from Jennifer Chen. Her voice carried an excitement he'd rarely heard from the normally controlled prosecutor. "We got him," she said without preamble. "Reynolds' chief financial officer just flipped. He's providing testimony about Reynolds personally authorizing the component fraud, personally setting up the shell companies, personally directing the cover-up. He's got emails, recorded conversations, financial records showing Reynolds' direct involvement in every aspect of the conspiracy. This is the smoking gun we needed, Nathan. Reynolds is going to prison for the rest of his life." Nathan felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for so long it had become part of him. What about the body armor case? The Kellerman Defense Systems prosecution? That's moving forward too. With Colonel Patterson's testimony and the documentation from Marcus Webb, we're reopening the criminal investigation. The original settlement is being challenged in federal court, and we're optimistic about getting it voided. Justice delayed isn't justice denied, not this time. After the call ended, Nathan sat in his apartment trying to process what this meant. The fight wasn't over. There would still be trials, still be testimony, still be months or years of legal proceedings before final sentences were handed down. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were credible. The conspiracy was exposed. He'd done it. They'd all done it together. Him, Alexandra, Marcus Webb, Colonel Patterson, all the other whistleblowers who'd found the courage to come forward. They'd taken on a system that seemed invincible, and they'd won. Nathan walked to Sarah's photograph, the one from their wedding day that he kept on the living room bookshelf. "We did it," he said softly to her frozen smile. "It took 6 years, but we finally did it." The Marines who died wearing that defective armor, their families are going to get answers, justice. Everything I should have given them the first time. His phone rang. Alexandra. "You heard the news?" she asked, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Chen just called me. The CFO flipped. It's over, Nathan. Not the legal process, but the uncertainty about whether we'd succeed. We did it. We actually did it." Alexandra's voice caught slightly. "I keep thinking about all the soldiers who died because of that defective equipment. How their families must have felt, being told it was just battlefield chaos, just bad luck. At least now they'll know the truth. At least now someone's being held accountable." "How are you doing?" Nathan asked. "With everything?" "Better. I'm working with the SEC now, helping them develop better oversight protocols for defense contractors. Turns out there's a lot of demand for investigators who actually give a damn about rooting out fraud." She paused. I've been meaning to ask, have you thought about Gerald's offer, Director of Ethics and Compliance at Carter Industries? Nathan had thought about it constantly, weighing the benefits against the complications. The salary would change his and Lily's lives. No more worrying about the check engine light, no more choosing between new tires and the heating bill. The work would be meaningful, helping to reform the very system that had failed so catastrophically. But it would also mean working for the company that had enabled Reynolds' fraud, being associated with a name that had become synonymous with corporate corruption. I don't know yet, Nathan admitted. Part of me wants to take it, to be part of fixing what was broken. But another part thinks maybe I've done enough. Maybe it's time to step back and focus on being Lily's dad instead of being the whistleblower who exposed defense contractor fraud. You can be both, Alexandra said gently. You've been both this whole time. Lily's lucky to have a father who shows her what integrity looks like in practice, not just in theory. They talked for a while longer, about the upcoming trials, about the reforms being implemented across the defense industry, about how their lives had changed in the months since that afternoon in the mall. When they hung up, Nathan felt a sense of gratitude for this unexpected friendship, this alliance that had formed out of a moment of ordinary courage. The trial of Victor Reynolds began on a Monday in late May. Nathan attended the opening arguments, sitting in the gallery with Alexandra, Marcus Webb, and several family members of fallen soldiers. The courtroom was packed with media, legal observers, and people who'd been following the case since the first arrests. Security was intense. Metal detectors, bag searches, marshals positioned throughout the room. Reynolds sat at the defense table looking smaller than Nathan remembered, diminished by the weight of evidence against him and the months in custody. His team of expensive lawyers tried to project confidence, but Nathan could see the cracks. They knew they were defending the indefensible. Jennifer Chen's opening statement was devastating. She laid out the conspiracy in meticulous detail, the defective components, the shell companies, the falsified documentation, the soldiers who died. She showed photographs of Marines killed in action, young men and women in uniform whose lives had been cut short by equipment failures that shouldn't have happened. She presented financial records showing Reynolds had personally profited to the tune of $47 million from the fraud schemes. This wasn't a mistake, Chen told the jury, her voice ringing with controlled passion. This wasn't an oversight or a quality control failure. This was deliberate, systematic fraud perpetrated by a man who valued profit over human life. Victor Reynolds knew that soldiers would die because of the defective equipment he was selling. He knew it, and he did it anyway, because their deaths were less important to him than his quarterly bonuses and his stock options. The defense attorney tried to paint Reynolds as a scapegoat, a mid-level executive who'd been following orders from higher up, who'd been caught in a system that incentivized cost-cutting without proper oversight. But it rang hollow against the mountain of evidence showing Reynolds had designed and directed the entire operation. Nathan was called to testify on the third day. He took the stand feeling surprisingly calm, his mind clear and focused. Jennifer Chen led him through his testimony methodically, his background, his role in the original body armor investigation, the pressure he'd faced to drop it, his resignation from the Marines. Then she moved to the current case, having Nathan explain how he'd met Alexandra, what he'd learned about the component fraud, the evidence he'd gathered. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive but ineffective. She tried to suggest Nathan was motivated by resentment toward the military, that his testimony was colored by his forced resignation. Nathan deflected calmly, pointing out that if he'd been motivated by resentment, he wouldn't have spent 6 years trying to rebuild his life quietly. He'd only come forward when presented with evidence of new fraud that was costing more lives. Isn't it true, Mr. Reed, that you've become something of a media celebrity because of this case? The defense attorney asked, clearly hoping to paint him as attention-seeking. I never wanted media attention, Nathan replied evenly. I wanted soldiers to have equipment that worked. I wanted corporations to be held accountable when they cut corners that cost lives. The media attention was a consequence of pursuing those goals, not the motivation for pursuing them. But you've benefited from that attention, haven't you? Job offers, speaking invitations, book deals. I've turned down every book deal, Nathan said. I've declined most speaking invitations. The only job offer I've seriously considered is one that would allow me to help reform the very system that failed. If you're suggesting I did any of this for personal gain, you're wrong. I did it because Marines died wearing defective armor, and someone needed to stand up and say that was unacceptable. The defense attorney tried a few more angles, but Nathan had been prepared for all of them. He stuck to the facts, maintained his composure, and let the evidence speak for itself. When he stepped down from the witness stand 3 hours later, he saw Jennifer Chen give him a small nod of approval. Alexandra testified the next day, walking the jury through her 6-month investigation with the precision of someone who documented everything. She showed them the trail of serial numbers, the altered quality control reports, the communications between Reynolds and his co-conspirators. She described the break-in at her office, the threats she'd received, the kidnapping, and attempted murder. Marcus Webb testified the following week, his voice shaking slightly but his facts unassailable. He explained how he'd tried to flag problems through proper channels, how he'd been marginalized and eventually forced out, how he'd kept documentation because he knew in his gut that something was terribly wrong. Colonel Patterson testified about the military side of the cover-up, naming Pentagon officers who'd pressured him to shut down Nathan's investigation, describing the culture of prioritizing contractor relationships over equipment quality. His testimony was particularly damaging because it showed the fraud wasn't just corporate. It involved military personnel who'd betrayed their duty to protect soldiers. The trial lasted 7 weeks. The evidence presented filled thousands of pages of transcripts. Expert witnesses testified about component failures and testing protocols, and statistical analysis of equipment malfunction rates. Financial experts explained the money trail. Military personnel described combat situations where equipment had failed at critical moments. Nathan attended as much of the trial as he could while still maintaining his responsibilities to Lily. He watched Reynolds sit impassively through testimony about dead Marines, through photographs of grieving families, through evidence of his systematic fraud. Only once did Reynolds' facade crack, when Jennifer Chen showed the jury a recorded conversation between Reynolds and his CFO where they discussed the acceptable casualty rate from defective components, as if they were discussing quarterly profit margins. Even his own attorneys looked shaken by that recording. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Nathan was at home with Lily when the call came that a verdict had been reached. He made arrangements for Mrs. Chen to watch his daughter, then drove to the courthouse with his heart pounding. The courtroom was packed again, every seat filled with people who'd followed the case from the beginning. Nathan sat between Alexandra and Marcus Webb, all 3 of them holding hands without quite realizing they were doing it. The jury filed in, their expressions carefully neutral. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The forewoman handed a folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. Nathan held his breath as the judge reviewed the verdict forms, his face revealing nothing. "The defendant will rise." Reynolds stood with his attorneys flanking him, his shoulders squared in a final show of defiance. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." The word rippled through the courtroom like a wave. Nathan felt Alexandra's hand tighten in his. "On the charge of falsification of government documents? Guilty." "On the charge of trafficking in counterfeit goods? Guilty." "On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice? Guilty." "On the charge of kidnapping? Guilty." "On the charge of attempted murder? Guilty." Guilty on all 37 counts. Reynolds' face went pale. One of his attorneys put a hand on his arm to steady him. In the gallery, Nathan heard someone sob, one of the family members of a fallen Marine, finally hearing the word that meant their loved one's death was being acknowledged, validated, avenged. The judge set sentencing for 6 weeks later and dismissed the court. As people filed out, Nathan found himself surrounded by family members of fallen soldiers, people thanking him through tears, hugging him, telling him their sons and daughters would finally get justice. "My boy was 23 years old," an older woman said, gripping Nathan's hands with surprising strength. "He died when his radio failed during an ambush. They told me it was just bad luck, just the chaos of combat. But it wasn't, was it? It was this man's greed. And you made sure everyone knew the truth. Thank you. Thank you for giving us that." Nathan could barely speak past the lump in his throat. "Your son deserved better. They all deserved better. I'm just glad we could finally prove it." Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting with cameras and microphones. Nathan gave a brief statement, carefully worded to avoid saying anything that might compromise the other pending cases. Justice was served today. A man who valued profit over soldiers' lives has been held accountable. But this verdict isn't the end. It's the beginning of reforms that will ensure this kind of fraud never happens again. To the families of fallen service members, to the soldiers who trusted their equipment and were betrayed by that trust, I hope this verdict brings some measure of closure. And to anyone working in defense contracting or military procurement who knows about fraud or corruption, come forward. Tell the truth. Stand up. Because as we've proven today, the truth eventually comes out, and the people responsible eventually face consequences. That evening, Nathan picked up Lily from Mrs. Chen's apartment and took her out for a special dinner at her favorite restaurant. They sat in a booth by the window, and Nathan let Lily order whatever she wanted, chicken fingers and fries and a chocolate milkshake that was probably more sugar than any 7-year-old should consume in one sitting. "You seem happy, Daddy," Lily observed, dipping a French fry in ketchup with the serious concentration children brought to such tasks. "I am happy," Nathan said. "Something good happened today, something I've been working toward for a long time." "Did you help more people?" "I think so. I hope so." Lily smiled at him, her face smeared with ketchup, her eyes bright with uncomplicated love. "I'm glad. You're really good at helping people." "I'm really good at being your dad," Nathan corrected gently. "The helping people thing is just something I do sometimes when it's important." "Can't you be good at both?" Nathan thought about Alexandra's words, about how he'd been managing both roles for months now, about how Lily seemed to be thriving despite, or maybe because of, seeing her father stand up for what was right. "Yeah," he said finally, "I think I can be good at both." Sentencing came on a humid July morning. The courtroom was even more packed than it had been for the verdict, with family members, media, legal observers, and people who'd simply followed the case and wanted to see its conclusion. Reynolds sat at the defense table looking older and more diminished than ever, the months in custody having taken their toll. The judge allowed victim impact statements before pronouncing sentence. One by one, family members of fallen soldiers stood and addressed the court. A father talked about his daughter, a Marine corporal who died at 24 when her body armor failed to stop a rifle round it should have stopped. A widow described her husband's last letter home, written 3 days before he was killed when his radio malfunctioned during a firefight. A mother showed photographs of her son's 3 children, who would grow up without their father because Victor Reynolds had valued profit margins over equipment quality. Each statement was devastating. Each one drove home the human cost of Reynolds' fraud in ways that statistics and evidence couldn't capture. Nathan watched tears stream down several jurors' faces as they listened from the gallery, their duty done, but their investment in the case still visible. Finally, the judge spoke. His voice was grave, carrying the weight of the moment. "Mr. Reynolds, you have been convicted of 37 counts of fraud, obstruction of justice, kidnapping, and attempted murder. The evidence presented at trial showed a pattern of deliberate, systematic criminal behavior spanning more than a decade. You personally enriched yourself by $47 million through schemes that you knew would result in the deaths of American service members. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no regard for the lives you were destroying." The judge paused, looking directly at Reynolds. "I have presided over many criminal trials in my career. I have sentenced murderers, terrorists, and violent criminals of all descriptions. But I'm not sure I've ever seen a defendant whose crimes were quite so calculating, quite so driven by pure greed with such callous disregard for human life. You didn't kill these soldiers with your own hands, but you might as well have. Their blood is on you." Reynolds stared straight ahead, his expression locked in careful neutrality. "On the fraud charges, I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison on each count, to run consecutively. On the obstruction charges, 15 years each, consecutive. On the kidnapping charge, 25 years. On the attempted murder charge, 30 years. Total sentence, 418 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole." The courtroom erupted. Family members wept with relief and vindication. Reynolds swayed slightly, his attorney steadying him. The judge gavelled for order and continued. "Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $215 million to the families of deceased and injured service members, to be distributed according to a formula developed by the prosecution and defense." All of your assets, including properties, accounts, investments, and holdings in shell companies, are hereby forfeited to the United States government. Finally, you are permanently barred from working in any capacity for any company that contracts with the federal government. The judge looked at Reynolds one more time. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, Mr. Reynolds. You will never see freedom again, and every day of your incarceration, I hope you think about the soldiers who died because of your greed, about the families destroyed by your fraud, about the betrayal of the trust that service members placed in their equipment. Court is adjourned. As Reynolds was led out in handcuffs, the courtroom remained standing in a kind of collective exhale. Nathan felt Alexandra lean against his shoulder, both of them too emotionally exhausted to speak. Marcus Webb wiped tears from his face unashamedly. Around them, family members embraced, their grief still present, but now mixed with something like closure. Outside the courthouse, the media presence was overwhelming. Jennifer Chen gave a statement praising the jury, the witnesses, and the collaborative effort between multiple agencies that had made the prosecution possible. She specifically mentioned Nathan, Alexandra, and Marcus Webb as exemplifying the courage required to expose corporate corruption. This verdict sends a message, Chen said, that no one is above the law, that corporate executives who endanger lives for profit will be held accountable, and that whistleblowers who come forward will be protected and supported. I hope this case inspires others with knowledge of fraud or corruption to have the courage to speak up. As we've seen, one person asking the right question at the right time can change everything. Nathan was pulled aside by reporters asking for reactions, but he kept his statement brief. Justice has been served. The families of fallen soldiers finally have answers, and hopefully, the reforms being implemented across the defense industry will prevent this from ever happening again. That's all that matters. The weeks following the sentencing brought a strange sense of anticlimax. The trials of Reynolds' co-conspirators were scheduled for later in the year, and Nathan would need to testify again, but the main event was over. The battle he'd been fighting for months had been won. Justice, delayed but not denied, had finally been served. Gerald Whitman called again with the job offer, this time with additional sweeteners, a higher salary, guaranteed flexibility for family time, a role in shaping not just Carter Industries' ethics program, but industry-wide standards. Nathan found himself seriously considering it, weighing the benefits against the complications. He talked it through with Lily in age-appropriate terms over dinner one night. There's a company that wants me to work for them, Nathan explained. The job would be helping to make sure companies that make equipment for soldiers do everything right, that they don't cut corners or do bad things. It would pay really well, which would mean we could move to a bigger apartment, or maybe even a house with a yard. But it would also mean I'd be busier sometimes, traveling occasionally, working longer hours. Lily thought about this seriously, chewing her chicken thoughtfully. Would you still be able to take me to school? Most days, yes. That would be part of the agreement. Would you still have time to read my dolphin books with me? Always. That's non-negotiable. Would you be helping people? Like you helped those soldiers' families? I think so. I hope so. Lily nodded, her decision apparently made. Then you should do it, because helping people is important, and we don't need a big house if we have each other. But if the job lets you help people and we can have a yard for maybe getting a dog someday, that sounds pretty good. Nathan laughed, the tension he'd been carrying about the decision dissolving. When did you get so wise? I learned it from you, Lily said simply, echoing words she'd said months ago that had meant just as much then. Nathan accepted the position the next day. He started work in September, after Lily began third grade, diving into the massive task of reforming ethics and compliance procedures across a company with 40,000 employees and operations in 12 states. The work was challenging, sometimes frustrating, but ultimately meaningful. He was building systems that would make it harder for future Victor Reynolds to operate, creating accountability mechanisms that would catch fraud before it cost lives. Alexandra became a regular presence in their lives, joining them for dinners and weekend outings, becoming something like family. She and Lily bonded over their shared love of ocean life, with Alexandra feeding Lily's dolphin obsession by taking her to aquariums and marine biology lectures. Nathan watched their friendship develop with gratitude, appreciating that Lily had another strong woman in her life, someone who embodied intelligence, and courage and integrity. On a Saturday in October, almost exactly a year after the mall incident, Nathan took Lily to visit Sarah's grave. They brought flowers, sunflowers, because those had been Sarah's favorites. And Lily chattered to her mother's headstone about school and friends and the new book series she was reading about a girl who could talk to all sea creatures, not just dolphins. "Daddy's been doing really important work," Lily told the headstone seriously. "He helped catch bad people who were hurting soldiers. It was scary sometimes, but he was really brave, and now he has a new job helping to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think you'd be proud of him." Nathan's throat tightened with emotion. "I think she'd be proud of both of us," he said softly. "We've had a pretty incredible year." "The best year," Lily agreed, "even with the scary parts." As they walked back to the car, Lily slipped her hand into Nathan's. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "That day at the mall, when you helped that lady and those security guards were being mean, were you scared?" Nathan considered the question, wanting to give her an honest answer. "Yes. I was scared that I might make things worse, or that someone might get hurt. But I was more scared of teaching you that we should stay quiet when we see injustice, that we should look away when people need help. Sometimes being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing, even when you are scared." Lily processed this, her small face serious. "I think that's what growing up means, learning to be brave even when things are scary." "When did you get so wise?" Nathan asked, not for the first time. "You keep asking me that," Lily said with a giggle. "Maybe you should accept that I'm just a very wise person." "Maybe I should," Nathan agreed, smiling. That evening, they hosted a dinner at their new apartment, larger than the old one, with an extra bedroom and a small balcony where Lily was growing tomato plants. Alexandra came, along with Marcus Webb and his wife Martha, Gerald Whitman and his partner, and Jennifer Chen. It was a strange assembly, brought together by a fraud investigation, but having become something like friends through the shared experience. They sat around Nathan's dining table eating takeout Thai food and talking about everything except the case. Marcus told stories about his grandchildren. Alexandra described her latest investigation for the SEC. Gerald discussed the reforms taking hold across Carter Industries. Jennifer talked about upcoming prosecutions of other defense contractor fraud cases, emboldened by the Reynolds conviction. Lily moved among them like a small ambassador, telling jokes and showing off her drawings and making sure everyone had enough food. Nathan watched her with a profound sense of gratitude. Despite everything, the threats, the publicity, the disruption to their quiet life, she was thriving, happy, secure in the knowledge that her father would always protect her and always try to do the right thing. After dinner, after everyone had left and Lily was asleep clutching her latest dolphin book, Nathan stood on the small balcony looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed with an email from one of the Marine families he'd testified for. It was a photograph of a memorial service, a headstone for their son who'd died 7 years ago, finally updated with an inscription that read, "Killed in action due to equipment failure caused by corporate fraud. His death was not in vain. Justice was served." Nathan stared at the photograph for a long time, feeling the weight of what had been accomplished. Reynolds was in prison. The fraud had been exposed. Reforms were being implemented. Families had answers. Justice, imperfect and delayed but real, had been served. His phone rang. Colonel Patterson. "Reed, I wanted you to know the Kellerman Defense Systems criminal case is moving forward. Indictments are coming down next month. 3 executives, 2 Pentagon procurement officers, and 4 testing facility employees. All because you had the courage to reopen a case everyone else wanted to stay buried." "We all had that courage," Nathan said. "You, Marcus, Alexandra, all the other whistleblowers. We did it together." "We did," Patterson agreed, "but you started it. That question you asked in the mall, do you consent? That was the pebble that started the avalanche. You made the rest of us remember what integrity looks like." After they hung up, Nathan remained on the balcony, thinking about the chain of events that had started with a simple question. A woman surrounded by security guards. A single father stepping forward because his daughter was watching. A moment of ordinary courage that had become extraordinary in its consequences. He thought about all the people whose lives had been changed by that moment. The families who finally had justice, the soldiers whose equipment would now be properly tested and maintained, The whistleblowers who'd found courage in his example, the reforms that would save lives for years to come. And he thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully in her room, growing up with the understanding that one person really could make a difference, that standing up for what was right mattered even when it was hard, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The video from the mall had been viewed over 200 million times now. It had become a cultural touchstone, referenced in articles about citizen activism and corporate accountability and the power of asking simple questions. But for Nathan, it would always be just a moment when he'd made a choice to speak up instead of walking away, to act instead of remaining silent, to do the uncomfortable right thing instead of the comfortable wrong thing. A year ago, he'd been a single father struggling to make ends meet, hiding from his past, trying to build a quiet life in the aftermath of personal tragedy. Now he was something different, still a father first and always, but also an advocate, a whistleblower, someone whose voice carried weight when he spoke about integrity and accountability. The transformation had been unexpected, often unwanted, and occasionally terrifying. But looking back, Nathan couldn't regret it. The path he'd chosen had brought justice for people who'd been denied it. It had exposed corruption that would have continued unchecked. It had made him someone his daughter could be proud of, someone who lived his values instead of just talking about them. His phone buzzed one more time. Alexandra sending a photo. It was a picture from dinner, all of them around the table laughing at something Lily had said. The caption read, "A year ago we were strangers, now we're family. Thank you for asking the right question and starting all of this." Nathan smiled and typed back, "Thank you for having the courage to keep fighting when everyone else wanted to quit. We make a good team." "The best team," Alexandra replied. "And Nathan? Sarah would be proud of both of you." Nathan looked at the photograph again, at these people who'd become his chosen family, bound together by shared purpose and mutual respect. Then he went inside, checked on Lily one last time, still sleeping peacefully, her face serene in the glow of her nightlight, and went to bed feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, purpose, pride in who he'd become and who he was still becoming. The next morning brought new challenges, new cases, new opportunities to make a difference. The defense industry reforms would take years to fully implement. The trials of Reynolds' co-conspirators would require Nathan's testimony multiple times. The work of building ethical systems that could withstand the pressures of corporate profit-seeking would be ongoing and never fully finished. But Nathan was ready for it. He'd learned that ordinary courage could have extraordinary consequences, that one person asking the right question could change entire systems, that standing up when others stayed silent mattered more than he'd ever imagined. And every time he doubted himself, every time the challenges seemed overwhelming, he'd remember that moment in the mall. The security guards surrounding Alexandra, Lily asking if they were bad guys, the decision he'd made to step forward and ask a simple question. "Do you consent?" 5 words that had changed everything. 5 words that had exposed corruption and saved lives and brought justice to people who'd been denied it. 5 words that had shown his daughter what integrity looked like in practice. Lily drew a picture in art class that week. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a tall figure, a medium-sized figure, and a small figure. Above them, she'd written in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Our family." The medium-sized figure was Alexandra. Without Nathan saying anything, without any formal discussion, Lily had recognized what they'd all become to each other. Family. Not by blood, but by choice, by shared values, by standing together when it mattered. Nathan hung the picture on the refrigerator where he could see it every morning, a reminder of what they'd built together, what they'd fought for, what they'd won. Justice for fallen soldiers, accountability for corporate corruption, reform that would save lives for generations, and a family, unconventional but real, built on the foundation of people who'd chosen courage over comfort. It was more than Nathan had ever hoped for when he'd stepped forward in that mall, more than he'd dreamed possible when he'd resigned from the Marines 6 years ago, more than he'd imagined when Sarah died and left him alone to raise their daughter. But somehow, despite all the fear and difficulty and uncertainty, they'd made it here, to a place where justice was served, where truth mattered, where ordinary people asking extraordinary questions could change the world. Nathan Reed had asked one question, And in answering it, he'd found not just justice for others, but redemption for himself. Purpose. Family. A life that mattered. And that, he thought, as he watched Lily play on the balcony with her tomato plants, telling them stories about dolphins and adventures, and the brave people who stood up for what was right, that was everything. The story that had begun with a simple question in a shopping mall had ended with justice served and lives changed. But the real story, the story of Nathan and Lily Reed, of Alexandra Carter, of Marcus Webb, and all the others who'd found courage when it mattered, that story was still being written. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And it would continue, Nathan knew, for as long as there were people willing to stand up and ask the questions that needed asking, willing to fight for truth even when it was hard, willing to believe that ordinary courage could have extraordinary consequences. Do you consent? The world had answered no. And together, they'd made that answer mean everything.